How far do we go to relate to one another? How far do we go to learn about the people around us? To relate to our environment, to make a connection with our neighbors and the people outside of ourselves. Me, I've done very little, perhaps in conversation at the bar or hanging out with friends. I've had many types of friends growing up from all walks of life and all around the world, yet I've done very little to go out of my way to know beyond who they are. For example, despite growing up in San Francisco, one of the most diverse places in the world, the environment that I grew up in was still highly homogeneous. My youth centered around the Catholic Church community in Daly City. I grew up around mostly Filipinos, and my family is Filipino. My closest friends are Filipino. I've been to Japan, yet I don't have any close Japanese friends. I've been to Vietnam, but I don't have any close Vietnamese friends. Black culture is a huge part of who I am, and I have countless black heroes that I've looked to for inspiration, yet I cannot call one black person a close friend. Although I've never chosen any friends because of race or culture, it's hard not to notice these invisible boundaries. So why does it matter?
I've gone through enough of my own stuff to know that dealing with pain is on your own is difficult, and dealing with unsympathetic people that have their own culture and they're saying you got to get with our program. I know that fucks with a lot of people, and how would it not? A lot of people come here expecting this to be like a paradise, and the reality of coming here is really hard for them. I'm one less asshole they got to deal with. And by staying grounded in what their reality is, I'm not going to have these kind of faux pas and saying dumb shit or I don't know how many times my girlfriend's been asked about cocaine. She's got a master's degree. She's not selling dope. But because she's from Colombia, it's, Pablo Escobar and the cocaine. And
right.
Man, shut the fuck up. I got tired of that shit. So I don't want to just add one more person in the world that does stuff like that. And just learning and embracing who people are or what's going on with them, for me, it's important. As someone that's never really had that, I want to give that to people.
That's Connor McCann, our next guest. He's the host of the Brain Drain podcast. I came across his video about San Francisco graffiti culture not too long ago, which was a topic I was very interested in for so many reasons. That led me to his other videos, topics about far corners of the world, geopolitics, organized crime, interwoven between personal stories about growing up during the early to mid-90s as a son of Irish immigrants in the middle of the city of San Francisco at the cross streets of gang violence and cultural diversity. When listening to his videos, I noticed the way he recalled information, the way he tells these stories, sometimes seemingly without any pre-written script, connecting the dots between two or more things that, on the surface, have no connection, is nothing short of amazing to me because he often finds a way to make it work. On a deeper level, this conversation showed me how little I know and why it's vital to learn deeply about the cultures around us, about the cultures around the world, how they affect us, the decisions we make, the decisions our leaders make for us, and how it affects the rest of the world, including some of the people in our communities. If not only because they're interesting stories, but because in learning we might be able to offer a unique observation to contribute ideas that spread love and light in the world. Or if only to admit that we don't know enough and accept the moments that we must sit and listen to the people around us, despite the urge to jump to sudden conclusions. In taking on a project like this podcast, I thought to myself, how can I possibly contribute ideas that bring people together if I have no idea what deeply divides us in the first place? I hope this conversation inspires that in you, the way it has inspired me to question the personal, social, and systemic barriers between all of us, the people right next to you, and everyone you might come across on a daily basis. How can we better relate to one another?
My father being from another country, it let me know, because there was a lot of people growing up in the neighborhood that didn't know that the world was bigger than just this little place we live right here.
Right.
I always had that consciousness to say, there's, I have family over there, I got cousins, I have aunts and uncles and stuff. There's more to life than just what's going on right here. The world's a big place.
Connor McCann joins us from his place in Asheville, South Carolina, a place where in recent years he's made home. Although San Francisco is a place he holds close to his heart, he has no plans of returning anytime soon. In this conversation, we get a glimpse of his side of the San Francisco cultural landscape, how to see conflict from a multi-dimensional perspective, and most importantly, I got a sense of someone that has indeed crossed over the barriers and borders in his mind to seek truth with the awareness that there's always a different answer or explanation. And in embracing curiosity and our pursuit of knowledge, there is a deepening of our relationship with the world and the people around us. Greetings and welcome to the Quake City Portal. I guess, I digested a lot of your podcast, the Brain Drain podcast, and very entertaining stuff. And I'm really glad that you mix a lot of this like history that it's such a talent that you're soaking in, and you're weaving in your own personal history to all these dark corners of history, I guess you would say, right?
You could call them those.
Yeah.
I feel like these are parallel experiences that we all kind of go through at some point. To some degree, we got to go through something. And it might not necessarily be like, there was one guy I was talking about. He was a coworker. His sponsor, he was a wrestler. I think he did Greco-Roman wrestling. His sponsor was a mafia boss. And the way that he ended up coming to the U.S. was this mafia boss. His name was Karabas Barabas. He ran the city of Odessa. Odessa's in the news right now because it's been shelled, and it's a city that has a lot of Russian speakers in it. It's a very diverse place. My coworker, he's a friend of mine. He was just a guy that got in and out of the military. He was a sportsman. This guy, Karabas Barabas, by the early 90s, had pretty much consolidated control over the different criminal rackets in Odessa. And Odessa is a city that's a criminal haven since, you could probably go back to Tsarist times, to the 1800s. And this guy, because Karabas Barabas was assassinated, a couple thousand people ended up getting killed. This guy had to leave. He had to leave the Ukraine. He never really planned on living anywhere else. And he moved to the Bay Area. And I have connections to people like this, passing connections. And these things, I'm blessed. These things tie into the subjects I'm interested in.
We've had these separate upbringings in the city, but the city is also just known for, hippies, tech, the LGBTQ community, but just two regular guys. It's like, we have our own stories to tell too, and I think that's what's really cool about how you're bringing like San Francisco graffiti to light, which is how I found you.
Right.
But it's also like even like the gang life, right? During the time that we grew up, it was just so prominent back then.
Yeah.
I think much less than it is now, even though I'm pretty sure there's like some pockets around the city. Yeah, I'm just glad that you bring those to light, because I fairly stayed mostly away from those kinds of. I mean, I was around a lot of like graffiti heads and hip hop heads, I guess you could say, but I never really, those were like my friend's older brother's crowd, like the graffiti crowd. So, I would love to touch up on all that stuff.
Totally, man.
Yeah, because it's a different side of San Francisco that I feel like,
people don't know about, and it's not what people think it is. And people could assume, like my mom, she's not from the city. I don't know about you, neither of my parents are from the city. So,
okay.
My mom she's from the peninsula, but her dad, my grandfather, grew up in the Excelsior.
Shit.
We kind of just like missed a generation. She ended up moving back. My dad is from Northern Ireland. And people might not even think somebody like me, an Irish guy, would have any kind of access to things like these. But it's really just about your location. And if you grow up in a neighborhood where those things are active, you're going to encounter them. What you do when you encounter them, that really depends on what type of person you are. Mm-hmm. For me, I grew up, I didn't have any family, like no cousins, no aunts, no uncles, no anything. All my dad's family stayed in Ireland, or they were in England. My mom, most of her family had passed away. She was the only child. So she didn't have any uncles for me to hang out with or cousins to play with. And me being like pretty much the only Irish kid anywhere I went, I would always look for different, kids to hang out with anytime I wanted to meet anybody. It was really up to me to initiate that. And when I encountered gangbanging, I encountered gangbanging when I was 11 years old. So it was in between 6th and 7th grade. The funny thing about it is I was already a fuck up by that point. So I was already getting in fights. I was already doing dumb shit and, cutting class and using drugs. And, I didn't really get into alcohol at that point, but, smoking weed and doing, kid stuff that we were doing as teenagers. Like it was always the next evolution to being, oh, well, so-and-so's doing this, so I'm trying to do this. Or so-and-so's this, so I'm trying to do this. I got caught up in that instantly. And I always felt like I had something to prove. When I encountered dudes, particularly, I believe they were from LNS, they were Norteños, they just accepted me. Like they just accepted me. Like I was instantly one of the homeboys. I dressed like them. Like I had the same kind of stilo. I was wearing the Ben Davis shirts, the Ben Davis pants. Like I was wearing like the red and black Pumas. Like that was already me. So I was just already one of them. They were already calling me a nickname. I was already claiming by that point, even though I never got put on a neighborhood or anything. I was already just by association. I was just with them. And it's so easy to just get caught up in that. I'm just looking to make friends. And my mom sent me to St. Kevin's. So St. Kevin's is a Catholic church on Cortlandt. I think it's Cortlandt and Ellsworth. And that's where she sent me as like part of like a summertime, like summer camp, like day camp. That's where I hung out with the gangbangers at. So it's like there was already 3 of them. They were already banging. They were already older than I was. And I think they were like maybe 13 or 14. But I've always been the type of kid, even when I was like 11 or 12, I'd have conversations with 40-year-olds. Like, so for me, being around the older homeboys, it wasn't that big of a deal. And that's really just how it came to be. But for me, that stuff was fun. Like going out, walking the neighborhood, patrolling the neighborhood, like, especially when some of the older guys would see you, you'd be like, hey, there goes, so-and-so. He'll honk the horn. He'll shoot you a peace sign. It's like, you're cool. The girls will want to hang out with you. The only girls that were at this summer camp program hung out with those dudes. And it was just something that it felt cool. The guys who were they were almost like ambassadors for the gangs. Like they would meet kids like me that didn't really have any kind of anything. My mom's working. My dad's already out of the house. My sister's doing whatever she's doing. I got nobody. I'm the perfect kind of recruit to be like a torpedo. Right. And I just want to be accepted. So it's like, that's how I got it, like exposed to it. But then when I started going to Everett in 7th, now I'm going to school in the other side's territory. And I got to be worried about if these dudes see me with these dudes, or if these dudes even know I live over here or this or this. It's bad enough. I stick out and I run my mouth a lot. So I'm already like one of those types of it's like shit talking ass kids anyway. So I'm going to get myself in trouble. I stick out. I got plenty of stuff to make, like people can make fun of me for stuff. That's, you remember how it was like, people were like on the mission to clown, and like people were waiting for stuff to like the same way that people are like social media now. We're like, oh, did you hear so-and-so got exposed or this person got their ass whooped? Right. It was the same thing. Like when we were in middle school, it hasn't really progressed any. And I had those things. But then I got to see the other side of gangbanging, where it's like I was on the 14 mission one day. I was at 18, like where was I? 18th and Mission. I just got on at 16th. There was a dude in the back. He had a red jacket on and red hat. So, he was banging. The bus stopped, and the Sureños, they pulled the wires off the bus. And you don't know what's coming next. They're trying to get on the bus. Maybe if they had a pistol or something, they would have just started shooting. I'm sitting like 2 feet away from the dude. So there's a good chance they come on here to check them or come on here to jump them or do whatever they're going to do. I might get caught up in that. And that's just riding the bus. You're not even banging. You're not even a part of anything. Like if I were to go over there wearing my Joe Montana or Jerry Rice jersey or something like that, it's over.
Yeah, it's over.
It's over.
Yeah.
Like I played soccer, and I practiced at Dolores Park, and I used to see the Sureños up there on 19th, just right by the statue. And I would just be waiting, like just waiting for my mom to come get me. And like if she got caught up, or if she saw somebody else, or there was traffic, like I was tripping. I was like, man, I need to get the hell out of here. And once again, I did not gangbang. So I'm a guy that's I didn't gangbang, but I still had to worry about all this stuff.
Right.
And these are just things that if you have friends, or my neighbor was a norteño. So if people came to see her, they might see me. And if they see us having a conversation, oh, he knows so-and-so from blank, let's get on. Like, that's just day-to-day life. You got to worry about that. I had to worry about that every day going to school. You got to worry about getting robbed. That, especially the jack move, like that was the primary thing you had to worry about. And it's like, especially over there. Just thinking about that. I got an episode that's going to talk about just street robbery and how it was almost like the people's crime. Like you didn't need anything. You could just go outside and just jack somebody.
Yeah.
And teenagers were caught up in that.
Because of the shoes, whatever clothes you were wearing or whatever.
Starter jackets.
What size are you? Yeah, starter. Oh my God.
The starter jackets, man. People getting killed for those.
Yep. Yeah, you're bringing up all these memories too, like in the bus. You didn't. I mean, you did not want to be around the back, but I'm going to use old school language throughout this whole conversation.
Yeah. People can figure it out later.
Yeah, you're a bitch if you didn't sit in the back. Like you were scared, you'll get called out.
Right.
Like I remember.
Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, he's this fool scared. He's like sitting in the middle, and man, I haven't thought about that in a really long time. But your side is what I always was just like. You're mentioning all these names like Cortland. I'm pretty sure 16th and 24th Street. Of course, those were like BART stations that you'd never get off of unless you're looking for some shit to get into. You know what I mean? So I was over all the way in Daly City, and even in Daly City, like if you were trying to stay away, that shit just still caught up with you. You know what I mean? It was more Filipino gangs rather than
RPB. I remember
RPB, them. But there were still a lot of like Latino folks out in South City, and all of us would kind of kick it. And man, I went to Sarah High School in San Mateo, and I don't know if there was any gangbangers out there, but there were still some Latino folks that we knew from South City, and out in South City there was like Susie Way. I don't know too many other crews, but you couldn't look at anybody the wrong way without being like, it was such a time. Yeah. You said you grew up around it, but you weren't a banger.
No.
Right. But like, there were still some instances, I'm sure, where like, okay, we're about to get into some shit, right?
In that short amount of time that I was hanging around and patrolling, and we never saw anybody from the other side. Like,
wow,
it would have been really easy if we really wanted to go do something, to be honest. Go right down to 20th. Like, there's dudes outside on 20th and Mission all the time, or there's that park on 20th in Valencia that I believe the dudes from MS, they used to be there really heavy. Like, if you want to go find somebody, you can go find somebody. Like, we were just like kids having fun and stuff. Any kind of shit I've ever gotten into, it's always just kind of been on my own accord. It's either I caused it or it was just happening. Like, it was happening, and like even the last time I even got in a fist fight, it's been so long. I was trying to stop something from happening. I was on Treasure Island, and I tried to stop a fight and then became the fight and got jumped. And stuff like that. Yeah, there's been a bunch of that. Almost none of it has been neighborhood related. I had a situation actually, and the funny thing is the guy was Filipino, and he was Filipino, but he was from a Sureño gang. And he grew up over there though. So it's like he grew up over there. He grew up with Latinos. I mean, as a Filipino guy,
right? You
guys have, I'm not going to say it's the same, but there's similarities between the cultures, and there's things just with the Spanish roots being what they are. There's things that are common. There's common words. Some things have the same common word in both, Spanish that folks from Latin America speak and you guys speak. in Tagalog.
Yeah.
There's those similarities. It's not really the most surprising thing that a guy like that would get caught up, but
Mm-hmm.
a different white dude from around the way, I'm not going to say his name. I think he's cool. He's cool now. Like, he's cool now, but yeah, we weren't cool with each other back then. He was saying things about them. Me being an instigator, I relayed what he said, and then he flipped it around and said, nah, that motherfucker Connor said it. And the same dude, I got into something else with the Vietnamese kid, and this guy was almost like kind of the big homie for the Asian kids. He wasn't going to let anybody really disrespect anybody. And it's like, I just wanted my issue with the guy. He was like, nah, you got to let it go. So me and this guy had, conversations where we had to work stuff out, but I got accused of disrespecting his gang. And that's really serious, especially when they're hanging out right around the corner from the school. I live all the way across the neighborhood, and I had no backup. So I definitely had that. I had guys where they could, if they wanted to, they could hit me in the face, and I know I got to let it slide. Like, I just got to take that. And it's like, I could do something about it. I can say, no, I'm not going to let it happen, but you can go get 20 homeboys. And I'm by myself. As time goes on, though, I get kind of more hardened to just that type of lifestyle. By the time I'm like 14 or 15 years old, I'm starting to carry a gun on me. Things have just progressed to the point where I'm just like, nah, I'm not gonna play this with anybody anymore. Anybody tries me, I'm willing to go really the full extent I can to protect myself. And really, as I got older, people just left me alone. And then I got my life together. I didn't want to be that person, but there's no way that you go to those dark places and don't come back with some of it on you. Everywhere you go, and it's like in San Francisco, even now, anywhere you go in the city, something goofy can happen everywhere. Right. And the last time I was back home was 2019. It was right before the pandemic. It was like December 2019. I was back there for like Christmas week, and I wasn't back 24 hours before someone started tripping on me on the F. Damn. And it was like, I was with my girlfriend. This dude's talking to himself, and he's saying my girlfriend is talking shit about him. And he's just having a schizophrenic episode, or he's going through whatever he's going through. I still got to take it seriously. And I'm like, man, I haven't been here a full 24 hours. And it's not like I'm looking for it. I'm not back in the old neighborhood. I'm just going. I think she wanted to see Fisherman's Wharf and Pier 39. I was like, we really don't need to do that. And she wanted to go anyway. We got there. It was whack. We left. But on the way to going down there, that shit happened. And I was like, man, like this is kind of one of the reasons why I don't live here anymore. It's always something like this.
I mean, it happened to me just this morning. I mean, I was parking my car on Alamany, and it was like 7 a.m. Got to move the car. And then this guy's just I'm like the only car there because I'm moving it. No, but who wakes up at 7 a.m. to move their car? I think me right here. You. That's it.
That's a big ticket though. That is expensive ticket.
Like $120. And then this guy starts walking towards me, and I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna go get some coffee. And then he doesn't get out of the way, and he starts pointing at me in my truck, and I'm just like, I have to really make an evasive maneuver just to get around this guy. Right. And I'm just like, okay, this is a normal day in San Francisco. It's like, you can do something nice for a homeless person, and that same homeless person is going to yell at you for, I don't know, whatever reason that they see. And it just makes me think like, man, were these people hugged when they were younger?
I don't know. The way I look at it is, man, is like, I think they're on the streets because whatever they're coming from is worse. or they're hiding from it, or they can't deal with whatever they got going on here. And I've had to deal with a lot of street folks. I talked about one in a video. I got a video called "A Crackhead Taught Me How to Ride a Bike."
Yeah. I seen that one.
A crackhead did teach me how to ride a bike. A crackhead from Ireland, one of my dad's friends, taught me how to ride a bike. And I was working at a luxury condo downtown, so like off like Geary, and I had to deal with a lot of people from the streets pretty much every day. A lot of folks sleeping on the streets, a lot of folks on drugs. And the thing that would trip me out is some of the people in the tower were less cool than some of the people I had to ask to leave. Like I go talk to people, I'd be like, man, that guy's cool. It sucks that he's in that position. And it's like, for some people, for some substances, I feel like you can use that and you're still going to retain a little piece of who you are. And that gives you some hope for when you get off it. If you get off it, if you're lucky enough to get off it and stay off it, you can still be who you were before you started using. I feel like other substances, that's not really possible. They strip you of pretty much your humanity and you have to build it back up. And some of the people that I would talk to were really nice people, really cool people. And it's just like the unpredictability of anybody back home, because it could be somebody that looks like me, that on the inside, this guy's been smoking some spice, or he's on acid, or he's he's been doing crystal meth for the last few days, and he's ready to just tell you everything about it. And you're stuck. Even if nothing violent happens, you might be stuck on the corner for like an hour talking to somebody, because, if you try to pull yourself away from this one, you might send them over the edge. And that's happened to me before, where somebody was alternating between crying, kind of threatening violence, talking about his experience. Like he said, he had just gotten out of prison. He did 17. He did 17 for armed robbery. He was from the Fillmore. He had just smoked crystal meth that day, and he'd been crying the whole day. And I couldn't get out of that because I knew it was going to be backed up with something. And just that it takes something out of you every time you have one of those. And it's like, you want to continue to be nice to people, treat people well. You got to protect yourself at the same time. And it's like, you don't know. And it's like that part of San Francisco hasn't changed any. Like so much has changed. Even from when I left to when I went back like 3 years later, so much had even changed at that point. And I feel like that part, the unpredictability, the folks on drugs, the people in the streets, like the level of inequality to where there's people that have jobs that sleep on the street. I feel like that hasn't changed at all. And it's like, you talked about telling these stories about this San Francisco that people don't ever talk about. And it's like, each day, one of us that's from there is leaving. There's not too many of us left from that time. And it's like, we don't tell them they're gone. And then it's going to be people that came in and kind of imposed their own culture, their own way of being. They had their own economic status. They had their own economic means to do so. The people that were there before were kind of just left with the memories. And it's like, damn near nobody I know even lives there anymore. It's like, we're all somewhere else.
So a lot of the people that you grew up with, where did they end up?
Oh, lots of places. A lot of people, like a lot of the break dancers. And for one, like, it's just funny, like damn near everybody, if not everybody I was breakdancing with was Filipino. Like I thought Filipinos created it. Like I came up, I'm serious. Like everybody I knew, like when I got to Paul Revere in 5th grade, and there was a dude named Jensen. He was Filipino. He was like the king of the breakdancers in the school. Like, and he would teach me how to break. And even some of the breakers that lived, because like Bernal Heights has a lot of Filipinos, or at least it did back then. A lot of those guys would come by. They all knew him. And when I went to Aptus, the other like king of the breakdancers was another Filipino dude named Sean. And like he had the bangs, like he had the long bangs with the fade. Wow. Yeah. And he like peroxided them. I started doing that shit. I was like, oh, that's fly. Like I'm gonna start doing that too. And I did the same shit. So it's like, I was thinking about this last night, not to just as a kind of deviation from what we're just talking about.
Of course. Yeah, please.
I was thinking about this. It's like, cause I've been around Filipinos my whole life. Like, at anywhere, the only place I haven't been around Filipinos is here. But any school I went to, any job I had, it was guys either from the Philippines themselves, or people that were born here, or people that came here when they were super young, folks that spoke Tagalog, like folks that didn't. folks that were mixed, like Filipino and Black or Filipino and Mexican. Like I grew up around so many people. So I was thinking, I was like, I can chart the other influences that other groups of people, because I grew up around everybody. I grew up around a lot of Arabs. I grew up around a lot of Cambodians. I grew up around a lot of different types of people.
Mm-hmm.
I can chart their influence. I was like, I was around Filipinos my whole life. Where does that influence come in? And I think the Filipino influence in my life ties in with the hip hop influence in my life. And those things were like this. Mm-hmm. And I was just tripping off that last night. And it's like, it's not reflected in the way I talk. Like, I'm not like, hey, what's up, dude? Like, I don't talk like that.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It'd be kind of a trip if I did. And I'm sure there's some white dude that grew up like in Daly City or something. All his homeboys were Filipino. He might be able to speak Tagalog like the same way I can kind of speak Spanish. Like, I know there's somebody like that out there. I'd love to talk to that guy. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like where people are now, a lot of people moved to the peninsula. A lot of people moved to like San Bruno. The first thing that I noticed that started happening, like my neighborhood got gentrified in the late 90s, like with the first like .com boom. So like 97, 98, I started noticing like the police would show up. So like the cops were just always around, and then you start seeing new people coming in, and then it's like suddenly you're going around the neighborhood, you don't recognize anybody anymore. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those people, some of the people that were on like Section 8 and stuff, people that were living in like those projects that were on Page Street in the Lower Haight, like I knew people living over there. Mm-hmm. They started moving further and further away out of the city. And then folks were ending up in Oakland for a while. Then folks were ending up in like Antioch and Hercules, Pittsburgh, Martinez. I know a lot of people that live in Vegas now. Not too many people in Southern California. We still seem to retain that bias. Like we just keep going this way, but not south. But if anybody still lives in the Bay Area, it's in those outlying kind of communities. Almost nobody lives in the city itself. Mm-hmm. I know, like maybe off the top of my head, like one guy.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask what led you to just get up and go off very, very far away from
definitely, man. Definitely, man. Because that people ask me the same question here. They're like, "Where are you from?" Because they can tell I lived in a really small town for like 4 years, and everybody there already knows each other. So they're like, "Who the fuck is this?" And they were like, "Why'd you move here?" So I had wanted to leave for a while. Like I felt like the money I was making didn't seem to reflect anything. Like I was spending a lot of money on rent. I had a decent apartment. Like the last place I lived in San Francisco, I was living on like Larkin and Sacramento, and it was a cool little place. It was too expensive. Just all this stuff you got to deal with being downtown. It just didn't seem worth it anymore. And I wanted a break from just where I've been living my whole life anyway. Yeah. I moved. I actually lived in Walnut Creek like the last year I was in the Bay Area. I was in a relationship. It ended. I really didn't feel like I had anything tying me to the Bay Area anymore. I was kind of over it. And on top of that, my mom had been diagnosed with cancer like the few months before that. And I was just like, she was cool. She was going through a process. She's totally fine now. She's been cancer free since 2015. But I wanted to be closer. She had actually moved to Boone, North Carolina, because she wanted to get the fuck out of the city too. Like she'd been living there the last like 40 years. She was over it. And she's retired. She bought a house. She was out there. I moved out to be closer because I was like, I don't know if this stuff's ever coming back. And like we'd lived apart for like 6-7 years. I was the only member of my family left in the city. So it just felt like it was time to leave.
You know, when I first heard your podcast, you have that city drawl that I associate San Francisco with, you know, and I switched from suburb to city a lot, you know, and that's why I never really picked up on it, but I can relate to it, you know. And when I first heard some of your stories, I was like, wow, this is a part of San Francisco that I remember, but I also like consciously stayed away from.
Right.
You know, but so when I heard
idea, that was a good idea, man.
Yeah. When I heard your stories, I was like, I was like, I want to talk to him, but I don't know if he would talk to me. You know what I mean?
Interesting. I want to know why you would feel that way. That's interesting.
Well, for one thing, I've always been kind of an observer. I've been around pretty much like pretty boy racers my whole life that were also down to fight and got into a lot of fights. I've been into, I was breaking up fights just like you. I wasn't trying to get into fights, but, not to say that I couldn't, because you had to. Otherwise, you would just you would be labeled as a bitch or a pussy, and there was so much machismo back then. So yeah, that's why I kind of, but then the more I heard your stories and even the subjects that you pick, I was like, wow, you have a very worldly grasp. And now I get it, because you said you grew up around Cambodians, Arabs, Latinos, Filipinos, and
Black folks, like, especially. No, I was going to add on that also, like, my father being from another country, it let me know, because there was a lot of people growing up in the neighborhood that didn't know that the world was bigger than just this little place we live right here.
Right.
I always had that consciousness to say, there's, I have family over there. I got cousins. I have aunts and uncles and stuff. There's more to life than just what's going on right here. The world's a big place. And totally, I mean, for me, I connected with people. People didn't know anything about Irish people. Like, kind of, I can mark the turning point to when Irish people started being cool. Like, even before, like, Conor McGregor and stuff like that.
Yeah, right.
Because in the 90s, man, like, I don't know what stereotypes there were about Filipinos. I don't think that Filipinos have gotten to that level of media recognition. Like, before I moved here, I thought Filipinos were everywhere, because I'm used to being around so many. I'm like, oh, damn, like, where the hell is everybody? Like,
yeah,
I didn't know it was just mostly a California thing. And with Irish folks, like, before Titanic and before like Riverdance, if you saw us on TV, it's like we were drunks or we were terrorists. Like, that's like the only kind of representation that we had. So when I would talk to people, their only questions for me would be about being either a drunk or a terrorist. And it was annoying. So people weren't bothering to learn about Irish people. I couldn't just say, hey, I'm Irish, we're the shit, you're going to have to figure us out. It's just me. It's me and my sister, and maybe like one Irish kid at this school or one Irish kid at that school or something like that. Or like sometimes there'd be like European students and stuff. So like, I had a friend, rest in peace, he was a Sureño, but he's from the Ukraine. And like him, I remember Albanian kid. I remember I was really cool with the kid from the Netherlands. So those kind of things always happen. But prior to that, I couldn't really count on just people being like, oh, you're Irish, I'm trying to see what's up. It was more like I had to learn something about where they were from just to even get a conversation going and show you like, hey, I'm not like to just be frank, the white people you're used to dealing with. I'm not like your landlord. I'm not like the police. I'm not like the principal, the teacher. Like, I'm a person. I'm just a kid like you. So I would learn about people, and I would just want to know what was going on. Like in the 80s and 90s, a lot of stuff was going on in these countries, like especially Cambodia, El Salvador, Guatemala, a lot of stuff going on in Mexico, a lot of stuff going on in Palestine. All these things were happening. So me knowing something, it's almost like this guy's kind of like an ally to us, or this guy's somebody that understands what we're going through, versus like I'm just some jackass kid.
You're the first person you made a really interesting observation about Filipino people, right? And you said you were thinking about it, and I think about this shit all the time. In that, what is the Filipino identity, right? Like, we borrow a lot from like our black brothers and sisters, and we borrow a lot from our Latino brothers and sisters, and a lot of our American, folks. I remember looking at this local TV station, Channel 26. We didn't have cable, but it's what connected our parents back to our motherland, right? But all the songs that they were singing were American songs, cover songs. And so I grew up with that kind of like mentality of nobody's looking to us for any kind of influence or perspective. You know what I'm saying? I mean, even I grew up around a lot of Irish folks too, especially as a Catholic. I'm a part of
Yeah.
the Catholic system,
Right. No, I hear that.
um, and even that was something that was more prominent than our own. But in our own circles, I guess it's just family. It's the food. It's the
Hmm.
yeah, and yeah, I appreciate that you made that point because yeah, I think about that shit all the time. Yeah.
As you should, as you should. I mean,
Hmm.
you're a thoughtful guy. I remember I was listening to your podcast with your brother
Mm.
from another,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you guys were talking about that. And even, I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with the history of the Philippines in terms
Hmm.
of just, even if you trip off it, how many different languages are spoken in the Philippines? There's two major
Mm.
religions. I mean, you can maybe even say three. I don't know if like evangelical Christianity's on the rise there. Like
Hmm.
Catholicism is on the decline kind of everywhere. So like
Hmm.
my girlfriend, she's from Colombia. There's
Hmm.
still a lot of Catholics there. It's primarily a Catholic country, but evangelical Christianity is on a pretty big rise. And it's like when you see the little storefront churches on Mission Street, like there might be a restaurant here, bar here, in between them church, like those types of churches
Yep.
are everywhere there now. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the same in the Philippines, but I know in the southern part of the Philippines, it's predominantly Muslim. So you might even have to say,
Hmm.
what is the central identity? Where people in up here, like I thought everybody spoke Tagalog. No, it's not like that.
Hmm.
Like Tagalog is particular to one part of the Philippines to
Right.
my understanding. And it's like people speak, like I knew one guy from the Philippines. He'd grown up here since he was a kid, but that dude spoke like five dialects.
Right.
And his parents spoke a couple dialects. He spoke them. He had moved around a little bit. It's really hard to craft any kind of central identity. We have that as Americans.
Hmm.
Like when we say we're American, we're really American when we leave America. When we go somewhere else, people are like, "You're American." But
Right.
here, it's like I'm Filipino, I'm Irish, I'm a quarter Italian, I'm this, I'm
Right.
that. We don't really have a central culture here either. We have the America stuff,
Yes.
but that's
Yes.
really particular to one type of person. Everybody else hasn't even been included in that culture. And you can even say still not included in the culture fully and fully embraced, to where you can just pop up in places or people are not going to trip off the color of your skin or what kind of religious hat you have on, or if you're a Catholic or a Protestant or a Baptist. We still do all that stuff with the most resources any country can really have on earth. We still struggle with that.
Hmm.
Philippines is struggling with a couple of different colonial legacies. It's struggling with deep
Hmm.
poverty, a lot of inequality, people coming back from America getting deported and trying to figure themselves out, people bringing gangs from America.
Right.
There's a lot going on. And it's like, how do you even answer that question of who we are when it's 15 different strains and there's nothing to really hold anything together in a central place? Like maybe something like
Yeah.
Catholicism or Islam can do that. But even
Yeah.
within those communities, there's a lot of difference. So it's
Hmm.
it's hard. It's the same thing with Irish people, to be honest with you. There's just a lot less of us. Like there's only
Hmm.
like 6 or 7 million of us
Hmm.
in Ireland. But
Hmm.
people like where my dad is from, there's animosity between communities, between Catholic and Protestant. And then there's animosity between the people from cities and people from the countryside. And then there's animosity if you're from Northern Ireland or you're from the Republic of Ireland. And then they have those animosities too between country people and city people, between rich people, poor people, immigrants. It's like, no wonder the British like took us over really easily. It's like we're too damn busy fighting each other this whole time. It's like, yeah, we just made it. Come on,
Yeah.
we'll be too busy fighting each other. You guys can do whatever you want with us. And it's like that's been our
Right.
history for like 1,000 years now.
Hmm. Hmm. And that's interesting too because that's exactly what the United States is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this big social experiment that I mean, I don't really pay too much attention to politics or anything as much as I should. But it doesn't take paying attention to know that there's just so much division here. And I
Right.
think it just comes from just trying to you're trying to make everybody happy and that goes with the territory that
Right.
there's going to be some unhappy people.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about, like you mentioned Islam and Catholicism bringing people together and that's a positive thing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It is definitely.
Um, which is something to say because I've never thought about as somebody that grew up Catholic, I'm always just kind of like unpacking a lot of the things that I grew up with.
Right.
about the shame, about the way that I would do it if I were, if I was a
If I
person.
was a priest, I wouldn't have done that to me type of stuff. Like,
Right,
yeah, I get
right,
that.
right. Yeah. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, given your level of understanding of all these
Totally.
political thought systems.
Absolutely, man. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's good and bad to everything. And I think each can be used for either. So
Mm,
you can use religion, you can use national identity, you can
mhm.
use like we're both Giants fans, for example. You can use that.
Right.
Like, you say, yeah, fuck the Dodgers, like, and we'll both agree on it. Like, I ran into a dude from San Diego and he told me, he's like, hey, I just want to be honest with you. I'm like, fuck Northern California. I was like, hey, man, that's cool. Like, I feel the same way about you guys. So it's all good. But on top of that, really is fuck LA. And he was like, yeah,
Mm,
exactly. So even though we're from very split up existences, and he looked like he was a street dude. He was functioning, doing whatever he was doing. So he
mhm,
would naturally, if he was functioning with certain types of people, he would have that bias against folks from up north. I
mhm,
understand, but we can even still come together on a common thing. So we could do that, and we can use that as a positive. We can say, hey, man, it's cool. We're going to sit down, watch the game together, have a couple beers, chill, and stay in contact with each other. Or we can say, hey, you know what? Since we don't like those people over there, let's go find one. We'll jump them. Like,
mm.
it's really up to us, like what
Yeah.
we want to do with that emotion, what we want to do with that connection. And
Mhm,
I'm somebody, I did not grow up Catholic. So I'm only Catholic because my family's not Protestant. So in terms of a
mhm,
political sense, that would mean I'm an Irish Catholic. I have never gone to a single Catholic service in my life. Like, I grew up
mhm,
in a really politically left-wing family. So my
mhm,
family were socialists. We weren't doing church services. It's like I actually ended up converting to Islam later in my
mhm,
life, though. And I've gotten to see, as someone that never had just a community, like, there's a good chance you grew up closer to the Irish community than I did.
mhm,
And during the time that I was growing up, there was almost no people from Northern Ireland. And there were those animosities between people from the Republic and people from up north. So I would tell those
mhm.
people, like, they'd see my name or something like that. Oh, are you Irish? I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from here, but my dad's from Belfast. And like one of those. And I'm like,
Wow.
So
Wow.
as an outsider who was Catholic, you might have been in a position to be shown more love versus an insider who's a piece of shit in their regard. So, it can go that way, and that's us still being quote unquote patriotic Irish people or whatever. We can use any piece of that experience for good or bad. It's really just up to the people who are participating.
Mhm,
And like I said, as a guy that didn't belong to any community, I used to go up to Toronto a lot. And I
mhm,
would go up to Toronto and I would go to mosques. I would go to just Islamic services. I go to Friday prayers and be instantly like people showing love, people coming up, hey, what's up, man? I want to, they want to talk to me. They want to know about my experience. They want to know about how does a guy like me convert? Like, what was it like? All those things. And those things are beautiful. But at some of those same places, like the places I was going to, you can tell what type of time that the people are on from what the Friday sermon is going to be about. Friday
mhm,
sermon at this one was about understanding your own role in managing just your own life and understanding your place in your community. That's a good message. If the message was everybody that's not a Muslim is going to hell unless we save them, and anybody that's going to stop that process needs to be eliminated, that's a place I'm never going back to again. And
mm.
you got to go and get your feet wet and go and see and really make your own experience to say, I'm going to be a part of something positive or I'm going to be a part of some bullshit. And
Wow.
I chose the bullshit option a lot in my life. But by the time I got to be a practicing Muslim and going to the mosque whenever I could, things like that, I wasn't looking for something like that.
Wow. That's fascinating, man. What drew you to the Muslim practice or the Muslim faith?
I have an episode I'm going to do about that. So
Okay.
I'll do the full, just the whole everything. But I'll say I went from being an atheist. I had kind of a moment of clarity, an epiphany. I believed in God afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And just I studied a few different faiths after that. I wasn't really too interested in like religious anything. I was an
Mm-hmm.
atheist. I was a left-wing political guy. I I didn't believe in God. I genuinely didn't believe in God until, proven otherwise. But I didn't have a good relationship with Catholicism growing up because my family weren't going to church. I would have to hear a lot of bullshit about it. And he'd be like, oh, you're going to fucking hell. Well, fuck you. So are you. Like, when did you become God? Like, I'm not trying to hear all that shit. Like, I'm a kid. So my parents said, hey, if you believe, do your thing. And they ended up moving on to separately. They moved into other faiths later, but I wasn't interested in that. I suddenly believed. I started looking at stuff, Christianity, Catholicism it didn't stick to me in any way. And I wasn't going to be a Protestant. I just wasn't, just with the history there. I just wasn't going to go there. I wasn't even interested in looking that way. But also the Trinity concept doesn't make sense to me. Like, I understand why. I understand what the theory is, but I don't feel a connection to it. I felt a single God in my experience. Judaism has a lot of rules. Judaism has a lot of rules. Like, there's over 600 rules you got to follow. I'm not really the best rule following type of dude. So that was kind of out. I was looking into Sikhism, and there were certain things that just said in terms of your physical appearance and things of that nature. I was like, man, I want to be able to look however I want to look. And I found the simplest and most just true to me explanations for what I felt and how I felt within Islam. So, and that was, that was in like 2006. I started practicing, like praying 5 times a day, abstaining from alcohol, abstaining from women, doing all those things in like 2017. But I don't live that way anymore, though. I had other things that kind of came along the way that maybe just made me look at things differently. And, I'll save that for the episode I'm going to do about all that stuff.
Yeah, because I grew up Catholic my whole life, right? And, you hear these phrases in church and like how Jesus is the truth, the way, and the light. And then I just had a friend recently passed away.
I'm sorry to hear
and
that.
I was no, yeah, rest in peace. And thank you for saying that. And just hearing these words regurgitated over and over again. But now I haven't been to church maybe in probably almost half a decade. And I'm hearing these words and I'm like, the Trinity, when you say the Trinity, I mean, I'm probably going to catch fire for saying this if any Catholics, listen to this, but I don't know. I ask questions, I'm curious. It just doesn't make sense, that a man is the way to like salvation or whatever. Right. And I respect to anybody that does, right? If it makes you feel a certain way and a positive, see people in a positive way, see the world in a positive way, why not? Go for it.
No, exactly. Yeah. I feel the same way. And it's like, I want to say particularly like Mormonism makes no sense to me. Like it doesn't make any sense, but I see people doing charity work. I see people staying connected to their families. I see people, trying to do the best for their children. And to me, that's more of what's important. My mom, she practices Santeria. She's a Santera. She's a priest or priestess. Like the fact that she does that and I believe in what I believe in, cool. And it's like, my thing is enough people have died behind that stuff. Enough people have used that as an excuse to go kill somebody or take somebody's land, take somebody's wife, take somebody's anything and said, okay, it belongs to me or it was willed to me. Or that's almost like one of the easiest justifications to do some fucked up shit is to say God told me to do it. And that's the stuff I'm not with. It's like whatever a person believes, that's their beliefs. Like we can talk about it. I'm gonna have my beliefs. You might change my mind. I don't see it happening at this point. Anything's possible. I'm not looking to change anybody else's mind either. Where it's like we can just share the information, we can talk, we can do the compare and contrast. But as far as like whatever a person believes, more power to them. Like I feel like if you do whatever you believe or whatever you do with another adult, if they want you to do it, what business is it of mine? And it's like I'm really not tripping. It's like that's your life. Like you got to live and you got to do stuff that makes sense to you. That's got nothing to do with me. I can care less.
in your studies of the things that you talk about, the subjects that you talk about, so many interesting things.
Thank you.
And yeah, I really enjoy the subjects that you talk about. But I want to know what type of or how you feel like it might have shifted your perspective a little bit, if you do feel that way, of just people in general.
I feel like everything I've talked about so far has had some impact on me in some way. So there
Mhm.
hasn't been anything I've just talked about just for like, oh, fuck it, I'll talk about this. I got nothing this week. Fuck it, I'm gonna do this one. Everything that, like, for example, I have an episode about the Toharians. They're ancient people. They existed a few thousand years ago. There's still some debate as to who they really were, what language they spoke. There's theories that I believe. There's been more things that come out even since I've released that episode. But learning about Central Asia, learning about nomads, learning about people that, because, you grow up, you feel like you got to get a house, you got to have a job, you pay your taxes, you got a wife, you salute the flag, like you do all that stuff. You don't realize that there's people that live a completely different lifestyle. They move from place to place, or they live in this place this part of the year. They live in this place different part of the year. They move for the winter. They move for the summer. They have a more egalitarian way of living. They have a more equal way of living because women have to help out with the work. So they don't have the same kind of patriarchal, it's a man's decision. It's a man's word. Everybody else, children, women, whoever, old people, they just got to go with it. They have their own challenges and they have their own things that aren't cool within society. Like there's a group of nomadic people now that still practices slavery. Tuaregs still practice slavery in Libya and in the places that they live. That stuff's really not cool.
Damn.
But there's other things about that experience that influenced me and opened my mind. Like that group of people, I've been studying them for since I was maybe in my early 20s.
Wow.
Each different thing, like the episode I did about Pat Finucane, that's really close to my heart because my family had to endure that conflict. And if it wasn't for that conflict, I wouldn't even exist, to be honest with you. My parents would have never even been in a place where they can meet had that war not going on, or had it not been going on. And I wouldn't even be here. So I look at things like that. Those things are really important to me. MMA is really important to me. I've been into martial arts off and on my entire life. And like I grew up, watching karate movies and watching Bruce Lee and Five Deadly Venoms and all that stuff. Yep. Like my father was a boxer. So he was a boxer and I was fighting. So it's like that was just kind of just normal stuff. And I have more of that kind of content just coming in the future. Martial arts, politics, crime, all these things are things that I've either taken part in myself or I've just, I don't know, it just internalized it in some way. Some of the countries that I've profiled, I've met people from those places have had really significant impacts on me. So I want to do the justice of their culture to just put stories out that, especially in this country, we don't even know shit about each other. Right. Like even where I'm at, like there's no connection between Asheville, San Francisco, anything. Even like I have a sister in Massachusetts. There's nothing tying any of us. And we have a lot of local stories people don't know anything about. And it's super magnified if you take it outside of America. And I have an episode on Turkey. People don't know how powerful the Turkish Mafia is. And the Turkish Mafia makes $50-60 billion a year. That's more than some countries make. And these are just mafia clans selling drugs. But because the majority of their business is in Europe, they don't get the attention here that I'm not going to say they deserve. But there should be awareness about people that are trafficking human beings and selling people into slavery. You should know about them.
Yeah.
In my opinion, at least.
Does knowing these stories give you like a kind of a grim perspective of the world? Or I'm just kind of curious as to, the outlook, because I mean, there is a little bit of truth to that saying, right? Ignorance is bliss.
Totally, man.
But this, like, a good friend of mine says the sword swings both ways in knowing these things. What do you think about that?
I think your friend's right, man.
Yeah,
I think your friend's right. I mean, the way I look at it is we're lucky that the things that are going on elsewhere aren't happening here. or aren't happening
Yeah.
here to the scale that they're happening somewhere else. Like my girlfriend's from Colombia. Colombia
Mm-hmm.
has been going through a lot, like a lot in the last couple of years. By knowing about it, I knew stuff about Colombia before we even met. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like living in America and knowing these things without the context of why they're existing and why they're going on, and these are natural human processes. Like humanity is ugly at times. There's things that are very beautiful, but humanity has a full spectrum of everything. Everything's possible with us. So the ugly end of it exists, but you can't have the beautiful part without the ugly part. And if you think about
Mm-hmm.
hip hop in America, hip hop didn't come out of Beverly Hills. Like hip hop didn't come out of, Pacific Heights. Like it's not like they were out in Seaview. Robin Williams had two turntables and a mic or anything. It came
Right.
out of poverty. Like it came out of the South
Yeah.
Bronx. It came out of people who had nothing. So it's like you
Mm-hmm.
get those things. I feel like embracing the ugly side connects me to the rest of the world. Not to say that the rest of the world is an ugly place, because that's very not true. But these things are real in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people that are here because of those things. And it's acknowledging their pain. It's acknowledging you went through something. You probably don't even want to be here. Like if it was up to you, you would still be back where you are with all your friends, all your family, living the same way you'd always been living. You're here
Definitely.
now. And I can't deal with the person, know that they went through that, and then turn my eye to it and say, well, I haven't had to go through that shit, so I don't want to hear about it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
can't, I've gone through enough of my own stuff to know that dealing with pain is on your own is difficult, and dealing with unsympathetic people that have their own culture and they're saying, you got to get with our program. I know that fucks with a lot of people, and how would it not?
Yeah.
A lot of people come here expecting this to be like a paradise, and the reality of coming here is really hard for them. I'm one less
Mm-hmm.
asshole they got to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And by staying grounded in what their reality is, I'm not going to have these kind of faux pas and saying dumb shit, or like, I don't know how many times my girlfriend's been asked about cocaine. Like she's got a master's degree. Like she's not selling dope. But because she's from Colombia, it's good Pablo Escobar and the cocaine. And it's like,
Right.
man, shut the fuck up. Like I got tired of that shit. So I don't want to just add one more person in the world that does stuff like that. And just learning and embracing who people are or what's going on with them, for me, it's important. As someone that's never really had that, I want to give that to people.
Yeah, there's so many social barriers, right? Between, you were talking about, you and your sister, for example, between you and I mean, even if it wasn't for technology, this conversation would not even
No.
be happening, right? And yeah, I've been trying to think about stuff like that too, is how it's so difficult to talk to people, at least in my mind, people that have, academic lives and, CEOs and things like that. People, the things that our society puts so much value in, and that's why I kind of wanted to have these conversations too, is because, we're regular people, but I mean, I guess the narrative that I'm thinking of is that people don't do enough due diligence before they actually form an opinion. And yeah, I kind of do want to have conversations with, like, I don't know, a Trump supporter, or because maybe we're not really all that different. It's just that's what the narrative is driving, I guess. I'm not too sure, but so yeah, with that, I guess I just want to ask you, you moved to a place, would you say that's very different from San Francisco as far as Asheville?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
100%. I mean, Asheville kind of reminds me a lot of like Berkeley. And if I'm gonna get an experience that's somewhat close to home here, it's gonna be in Asheville. So where I lived before is almost like not even the same planet. It is very different. I mean, if you want to talk to a Trump supporter, I know a bunch back home or back in Boone, you could talk to, and it's like those are the people I was working with every day. So I'm the only guy on the left wing side of things up there, probably, that they've even met. Most people that they've met are people just like them. But a lot of it actually kind of reminded me of growing up in Bernal Heights and in the Mission. where there's
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows each other. You know, this guy's cousin, those connections are very close.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, being not from there, not being a church going guy, and being older, not being like, because there's a college there, all the college kids socialize, but I'm not trying to kick it with 20-year-olds. Like,
Yeah.
that's not me. Like, I'm not going to be 38, 39 years old and be like, where the 19-year-olds at? I'm trying to chill. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not doing all that. So there was no place for me. And that can kind of feel the same. People have their things that they either include you in or exclude. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
exact same thing as back home. Most people just wanted the same things. The viewpoints and the perspective coming from the things that had occurred in their lives, the things that they had learned from their sources of information, whether it be Fox News, church, certain authors, or just the tradition that they came from. Like, I can say I don't agree with it, but I can't say that the last couple hundred years of things happening a certain way in America isn't going to influence the way people think. It's, of course, going to influence how they feel. And these are people
Mm-hmm.
that you can almost say maybe have in some way benefited from the system in the country. So they're not going to look at it so antagonistically. They're not going to look at the police like in an antagonistic way, because these are people they grew up with. These are people that they
Right.
feel like genuinely keep them safe and stuff. So the different kind of viewpoints that we have, some things are universal, but there's a lot to just try to figure out. And at times we definitely didn't see eye to eye.
Interesting. Yeah, because sometimes I think, you mentioned it's a small town, and I think, a lot of our thoughts, a lot of our opinions are shaped just by the people that we hang around.
Totally.
Most of our lives, especially when we were younger, right? Going back to, when we were in our youth in San Francisco. I mean, that's all we knew, right? Because just like you, my parents were immigrants, and they immigrated from the Philippines. And I think that's what made such a traumatic experience for the youth, is that our parents were too busy trying to figure out how to put food on the table, how to put a roof over our heads, and we just had each other, so you had to think the way everybody else thought, because otherwise you're just going to be isolated.
Absolutely.
And I think it's the same way with maybe adults. It's just whatever bird feather is around you, you're going to flock around that, right? Until you start reading things like, like I'm just going to mention the Gulag Archipelago for reference sake. And when I read that, I was just kind of like, this is a whole horrific experience that human beings in another time experienced, and some are still experiencing to this day, right? And I think about my position in life, and I'm like, what gave me the right to draw this lucky card that I didn't have to experience this horrific thing? And at the same time, I think I'm no different. Like, if I was born in another state, my whole perspective would be totally different.
Right.
My whole way of thinking would be totally different. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that people aren't that much different from each other than where they were born and who they were around. You know what I'm saying?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, we're from the same place and we're different. Like I think you said you're from Excelsior, Daly City, right? Like one of the two.
Excelsior, Outer Mission, yeah.
Yeah, so that's like within 25 minutes, and we can have super different experiences. Much less somebody like the town I was living in has less people than Bernal Heights, and probably is a third of a third of the size of the Mission. So if the Mission has like 60,000, this place has 20. And some of those people there are just students. They're going to be gone. And how do you not, unless you're actively looking for another perspective, how do you not just go with what's there? And like you said, people are trying to, make the most out of their lives. People are trying to put some food on the table. People have concerns. They might have personal concerns, marriage concerns, money concerns. All these things are going on. Like folks coming from the Philippines in the 70s and the 80s are leaving behind a dictatorship. So a lot of things can happen in that. just in that experience, like the kids that I was meeting that were Cambodian, their parents had survived the Khmer Rouge. Like they had gone through stuff that is inconceivable to the rest of us. They were some of the friendliest people I knew too. They were the people that when I go to Holly Courts and I'd see some of the kids that I was hanging out with, I'd see their parents. They were always waving. They were always smiling. And you have no idea that these people, they might have witnessed cannibalism. They might have witnessed children murdering adults. Like all these awful things. They could have been walking through a minefield, seeing somebody getting blown up. Like they could have been starving for the 2 years or 3 years that they were under Khmer Rouge, forced work. Like all these things are going on. And on top of having those things on replay in your head all the time, now you got to raise a family and you don't speak English. It's hard to find work. It's hard to find even people from your country. Your kids don't speak your language anymore. They're wearing these funny clothes. They sound like these other kids over here now. Like it's a lot for people. And for me, we talk about drawing the lucky card. I could have been born 4 or 5 years earlier and grown up in Northern Ireland and would have been, just party to the police coming, taking family members away, people getting shot. Like, I mean, actually the same shit happened in San Francisco. So it is what it is, but it could have just been on a much more intense scale, but we all kind of go through some version of it. And if it's not that, it's going to be something.
Wow. I'm really like impressed at your level of knowledge when it comes to these kinds of things, because, a lot of people talk about immigration and trying to understand the other side, but these experiences rarely get talked about. Like what parents and immigrants in our generation and maybe generations ahead of us too, bring with them. And even I'll honestly say I haven't really thought about it that much unless it was my own parents. Right. And some of these people are sending money back to the countries that they came from just to help support. I mean, I have a roommate too. He's, 30 something years old and he's doing the same thing. So, I mean, it hasn't stopped. And in some ways, you got to thank places like the United States that allow that kind of thing to happen. But also I see like for example, I am a second generation Filipino American here, right? And there are still first generation Filipinos who are my age or a little bit younger. They're working let's just say hospitality jobs,
security.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Guys doing security for sure.
Right. And they have the mentality where they're just thankful to have the job. Right. And here I am, American born. I'm just like, no, not going to do that.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that.
yeah. You know what I'm saying? So, perspectives, it's all about perspectives. But I guess, coming from where you are, where did that curiosity come from? And just to level with people around you like that?
I mean, kind of like I said earlier, I wasn't going to have friends if I didn't do some version of that. And it's, especially, I mean, I talked about it. I put out a video last month about I almost died. So I've almost died a couple times, but the first time I almost died, I tell that story. And pretty much any classroom or park or sports team or anything I did, I was the white kid. And it's just, I don't know, natural empathy, natural just wanting to connect, wanting to belong, wanting to talk to people, wanting to learn. I've always been curious. And I've always wanted to know what it's like in other places. And I had I can go down the list like of just people's experiences, and especially at those times, the intense things going on in those places. And a lot of those people felt like they had nobody to talk to about that stuff, or nobody understood, nobody cared. And that's continued. And it's like, it's in the world, it's always somebody's turn. Everybody's going through, some countries going through something. And you want to look at a country as, like Syria. So Syria has been going through it for the last decade now. The country's been destroyed. Part of it got taken over by ISIS. It's had foreign armies invade it. Dictator there has been committing genocide. I almost went to Syria in 2009. Syria was a safe, stable place. It was a dictatorship. So 2009, my father passed away, but I was planning a trip to go to the Middle East. I was going to go to Turkey. I was going to go to Syria. I was going to see if I could finagle my way to go to Israel. That was my plan. And 2 years later, that's impossible. To where it went from 2009, if you're going to go anywhere in the Middle East and avoid certain things that Americans are subject to, Syria is one of those places that you can go. It's not like they didn't have those issues kind of bubbling under the surface, especially with Islamic fundamentalism. Those things were going on, but 2 years later, if you go there, it's kidnap or death. Unless you're going there to join the jihad, like it's kidnap or death. That's what's going to happen to you. And that's 2 years. I mean, in a year or two from now, we can look at Ukraine with the situation that's going on there. That place might be completely flattened. We don't know. And if you go back 4 years, or if you go back 10 years, Ukraine has its issues, but you can visit. You can pull up. You can go to the beach. You can go to Odessa. You can go to Kyiv. You can go wherever you want. Now you might not even be able to move freely even between cities there. And it's just stuff changes so fast. We're lucky that we haven't had it here since like the 1860s. But everybody gets a shot at it. Everybody gets this kind of turmoil. It's either going to make you or it's going to break you as a people, and you're going to become this group of people, this one. You're going to split off and do your own thing. We're going to have to face that at some point.
How do you think, based on your observations of things around us, how close do you think we are to something like that happening here in the U.S.? It's
a good question. I think it really depends on where you are, because in some places there's no tension. Like some places it's really just one or the other. And in those places, nothing's really going to crack off. If you look at a place like Portland that had sustained violence, all it takes is one gets killed on this side. They run it back and kill one on this side. Now this one's killing one on this side. And then maybe they couldn't kill this guy, but they kill his wife, or they kill his dad, or it gets personal, and it stops being tit for tat. Now it's just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's all it takes. It just takes a period of heightened tension, which we've had a couple of those in the last few years. Like 2016 was tense. 2020 was really tense. Not just with the election, but with coronavirus and people losing their jobs. Like there was a lot of tension. People felt like they were losing what they had worked their entire lives building up, and it was going to be gone. It was either going to be gone because they had to wear a mask now, or because they couldn't go to work, or it was going to be gone because the other side was going to come, win the election, steal their guns, or do this or do that. And people were tripping. And all it takes is when people have those suspicions, like, oh, they're going to do this, or this is going to happen. This is going to happen. If it happens, it's not a suspicion anymore. That's reality. And in places where they already have those groups of people regularly facing off with each other, all it takes is somebody from the other side to get clipped. And your side says, nah, fuck that. We're not going for it. We're going to do the same. Then it's conflict. It gets to be a problem when those kind of conflict actors who, when society is stable, those people are on the fringes. Those are the people talking about, we need to overthrow the government. We need to do this. Those voices are always out there, but we don't pay them any kind of mind. We say, that motherfucker's crazy. Like, I'm not trying to hear all that bullshit right now. I'm trying to go to Starbucks. However, when it starts getting real, and it seems like those are the only dudes that are going to protect you, or they represent what you represent, or they represent your group, you might have nothing to do with them otherwise. But like, that's how ISIS became legitimate. ISIS was looked at as people that were exploiting the Iraqi people. They were chopping hands. They were punishing people for breaking Islamic law and then breaking Islamic law themselves. There's a particular word in Arabic I'm not going to use because it's an accusation, and that can get me in trouble I don't want. So I'm not going to call them that. Other people have already done it. I might agree or I might not. But I'm not a fan of ISIS. I'll say that off top. But they were doing these things. They were abusing the population that they claimed to represent. They were committing sexual violence. They were stealing from people. They were extorting people. But they were the power. They get ran out of most of Iraq. They're living in the desert. A Shia president decides he's pushing the sectarian line. Now, these are the only people to protect you. So what are you going to do? You're either going to stay where you're at and get killed, or you're going to go join ISIS.
Mm-hmm.
And all it takes is people to feel like that's who's going to have my back. Fuck, because most people don't care about politics anyway. They don't care about this ideology, or they have this viewpoint on this, or they believe this or that, whatever. I need food. I need a damn house. I need a job, and I need to make sure I'm not going to get killed. And whoever's going to give me that, that's what I'm rolling with.
Wow.
So that's, in my opinion, we're kind of in some ways far from that, but the early stages of that, we're already doing it.
Yep. I definitely agree. And some scary times too, especially looking at what happened at the White House, I guess. What was that, just a year ago? Legitimately though, like if something really did happen and an overthrow happened, I can't even imagine. Let's just go with the pandemic. I mean, 2020, I'm looking back and I'm thinking society is hanging on a very thin thread, a lot thinner than what we think to make ourselves comfortable to think. And it made me rethink my own personal resilience. Can I get food and shelter? Can I protect my loved ones if it ever came down to it? And a lot of it was just like, here I am in this hive of San Francisco, no, I don't think I could, I mean, personally, like I know self-defense. I know, I train, jujitsu. I'm in pretty good shape, but to protect others requires more than that. Right. And then food became like an issue where you couldn't even go to the grocery store. So it's like, do I know how to hunt? Do I know how to forage? Do I know how to get shelter? And I was just like, I'm going to do these things so that I don't feel that way anymore. And I think a lot of people are starting to adopt that same type of mindset. Like, can't depend on the government. You know what I mean? And in a way, you have to kind of like depend on a network of people, your neighbors even, which around here in San Francisco, ironically, we're so close to each other, yet we don't even know each other.
This, fuck this fool. Like, I don't even want to talk to this dude. Like,
right.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
And I remember you were talking in one of your podcasts, the height of hipster culture or whatever. I mean, these people, you would walk down the street in the same neighborhood, they wouldn't even make eye contact with you.
Yeah.
I come across certain things. It's easy to come across things like that on social media, especially like everybody's trying, we're living in a world where metrics are such a huge thing. Numbers, right? How many likes you get, how many subscribers you get. And so I look at it in a term from a lens of what is this person getting out of exposing this story, right? And if it just seems like there's no real purpose into, I mean, it's a great story maybe, but sure, but what is this person getting out of it? How is this person telling the story? Is it like robotic? Is it like, I don't know. I just look at it from that kind of lens, and I don't know if people look at certain media types, media presences online, and are able to discern those kinds of things for themselves, right? Do they ask themselves these questions, or do people just consume it like it's just like McDonald's or something? You know what I mean? It's hard to really tell. And I even have difficulty, right? Because I'm starting to learn, I'm starting to be more curious about the conflict in places like, the Middle East, for example. I know nothing about it. I'm ignorant to it. I've been ignorant to it for a really long time. And I'm starting to ask questions as to how it really affects everybody to learn these things, right? I honestly feel like it's really hard to tell what's legit and what's not, right?
Yeah,
like,
especially now.
What perspective are people leveraging? It's hard to really tell. I don't know. I think that's really dangerous, right? I try to come at a topic from a very neutral perspective, I guess. I don't know.
No, I hear that. I hear that. I try, I guess for myself, I understand there's going to be some level of bias in everything. So
Mm.
everybody is going to tell some kind of reduced version of their end of the bad shit or gloss over it. You can get that from the enemy side though. So you can look at, say, let's take what's going on in Ukraine right now, for example.
Yeah.
You can look at, if you look at it solely from an American point of view, with no other kind of context to it, with no other kind of anything, you can say it looks like one country invading and taking over another country.
Mm-hmm.
You can say that. And as an American, with the values that we have, we're going to say that's fucked up. It needs to stop. Like, we believe in freedom. We believe in liberty, justice for all. That looks like all the opposite of that shit. So from our perspective, it's easy to just see the parts that make sense to us and say, okay, that's all that's happening. I'm going to say, fuck Vladimir Putin. I'm going to, start putting Ukrainian flags on my social media accounts. I'm going to do this, but they feel like they're helping. And I feel like good intentions are good intentions. That might be the capacity. Not everybody has all day to sit around and read about shit. Not everybody has the want to even do so. Like for me, there's multiple layers that I have to go through, even for stuff I know. Okay, what did I miss here? What did I miss here? What did I miss here? That's an ongoing process that's going to happen for as long as I'm alive. And for something like Ukraine, where the roots of that go back to the 1600s, I did an episode about the roots of that. So there's an episode called Stuck in the Middle that is about the Bohdan Khmelnytsky uprising. That is the roots of the modern issue between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine has not really existed as an independent country, aside from briefly after the Russian Revolution in 1917, and then from the fall of communism to now. So Ukraine has always been a part of a different place. However, there are things that create that national myth that we're talking about, that national identity. They have them. They have those things. So they've been a people, but they haven't been an independent country for about 30 something odd years. That's the extent of their independence. There's people in Ukraine who consider themselves Russian and have been living in these parts of Ukraine for some time. These parts of Ukraine are industrialized. They're right next to Russia. And really, even the differences between Ukrainians and Russians are pronounced, but there's a lot more commonality than there is difference. There's more commonality with each other than the people that are either this way or the people that are that way. So there's these different things. There's people that don't even look at Ukraine as separate from Russia. Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire for a very long time. Some things that are central to Russian national thought happened in the Ukraine. The first big city in the region that all these people sprouted from is Kyiv. That's in Ukraine. So it's like these two places are very connected. Vladimir Putin does not look at Ukraine as anything other than a part of Russia, and a part where the Battle of Poltava happened, the Potemkin Steppes are there. There's a lot, the Crimean War happened there. The Crimea previously was part of Ukraine and was annexed by Russia in 2016, I believe. Like, these things have all happened over there. And now you do not have access to some of your legacy. That might be how some of the Russians look at it. For the Ukrainians, they can look at themselves as a people. Some might look at, we've been crushed on, this side. We've been crushed on that side. It was the Polish before. It was the Russians. Maybe it was the Habsburgs. Maybe it was the Tatars. Like, a lot of Ukrainians got sold into slavery. So like Ukrainian women, particularly in the Ottoman Empire, that was like, if you were going to have a slave, like a concubine, those were like the top level concubines. So people, they would send raiding parties into the steppe lands and just kidnap people and sell them into slavery. So they felt it from all different directions. I'm sure what they want is a chance to just be themselves. And this is history coming back and imposing itself on. It's a historical viewpoint imposing itself, backed by tanks, backed by planes, backed by bullets. But it's an idea that's being imposed on them that says, you're not really you, you're really us. Right. So it's complicated. Just people, any situation that ends with people shooting each other is usually complicated. And, we see Rambo, we see the Terminator, we think if you're busting a gun, like, it's a simple thing. It's really not. And this situation in Ukraine is just, it's complicated in ways that we can't even just fully discuss, because we'd be talking for a couple, not even just one day, we'd be talking for a few days about
Yep.
the back and forth and who's been there and who's not been there and what's a nation and what's not. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's always good to, if you're going to speak about that publicly, at least understand part of it. And
Yeah.
that's where that's part of my inspiration as well. I don't want to get out here and talk about stuff and sound like a fucking idiot.
Yeah. So I'm sure because of knowing these things, and maybe in some circles, right? Like, have you ever gotten the question, why does studying all these histories and even modern history or the news, why does it matter? Why does knowing your history matter?
I'm gonna say only white people have ever asked me that. Be honest.
Yeah.
I've never had anybody that's from somewhere else or has roots
Mm-hmm.
to somewhere else ever ask me that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, it's important because we all go through the same thing, and you can find the same dynamics in a different time. Like human behavior is limited. Like, we have endless possibilities as far as the stuff we can create, but as far as who we are and how we function, what our mindset is, what our motivations are, those things are all pretty limited. And just because people are wearing different clothes, or the buildings look different, or they speak a different language, doesn't mean that they're any different on a fundamental human level.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can read somebody else's history and see something coming from a mile away, it might save your life. If you're up on history and you look at the rise of Hitler, and you have a Hitler-like figure in your country, and you're starting to see some of the same boxes be checked, that might be a sign to say, hey, maybe I need to do something about this. Maybe I need to get the hell out of here. Maybe it at least inspires maybe, versus, oh, fuck, it's too late. And that's something, I don't like being caught off guard by stuff. I'm genuinely just interested. More than anything else, I'm just interested in places and things that were going on. And this is how you find out about them. And it's important to me on a personal level. Whether it's important to the next person, maybe so, maybe not. I mean, I feel like not everybody needs to either. And it's like, a lot of people are going to cause themselves a lot of shit trying to go about such a lifestyle. And it's like, as long as you're a decent person and you're doing things out of your own pure intentions, so be it. What the fuck can I say to you about anything?
So in a way, like, being curious about these things, being curious about anything is kind of like a blessing and a curse at the same time, right? Like, just wanting to share these things in your mind is why you started your channel.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's why having these discussions with you right now is like why I wanted to start this whole podcast. It's hard to talk about these things with people that aren't genuinely curious, right? And they have to get out somehow. I guess what I want to ask you next is, how do you digest all these things and regurgitate them so well? What's your note-taking system? What's your
it goes here and it stays. Some stuff, I used to have a much better memory. I think just age is catching up. But if I read something and I connect with it, I remember, and it just stays somewhere in there. It's just there. When I'm putting together an episode, I will write notes, just for things I want to talk about and stuff like that. The one about graffiti, I just kind of just freestyled it. I felt like that was the best way to do that. But in terms of note taking when I'm learning, never really been something I've done. I just always had a really good memory, I guess.
What places have you been besides Canada?
I mean, I love Canada though, so I'd love to go back.
Same here.
I haven't traveled a super lot. I've been to both Irelands. So I've been to Northern Ireland. I've been to the Republic. I've been to England, briefly Germany, and Israel. I went to Israel for a month. What about yourself, man?
I've been to Vietnam. I've only traveled in my late 30s, mid 30s actually, because I spent a lot of my time in the kitchen, meeting a lot of people from Central America, all over the world. I mean, San Francisco, cooking in San Francisco attracts a lot of people from around the world. And so that's how I got my perspective of life in general. I mean, there were guys that were working on minimum wage, and they would take so much pride in just like cleaning a kitchen, and the look. I remember the look that I saw on somebody. This guy, his name's Goyo from Guatemala. He just looked at the kitchen with so much pride, and that changed my whole life. Like it really isn't about money, it's really about like engaging with your environment. And that's kind of like what I'm doing now. I just kind of left the kitchen. I'm just trying to like work with kids. Just make it less about myself, really. Yeah. And sometimes I have to battle with those ideas in my mind. Like, we're on a podcast. Of course, I really find value in conversations like this, but I don't really like promoting. You know
Yeah,
what I
me
mean?
neither. No, me neither. I don't like talking about myself, believe it or not. Like, I think it's kind of
Yeah,
asshole shit to do. And
right.
I'm a naturally low key guy, but if I don't do this, it's not coming out. It's either this or just keep it to myself. And
Right.
at this point, like you said, that's not really an option.
Yeah, and it's powerful to share, because otherwise it just kind of dies with you, right? And me learning throughout the years, that I've been affected by people who are willing to share, and it's inspired me to do things. I mean, jujitsu, take jujitsu or martial arts. You were saying you're a lifetime martial artist too. I mean, those guys could have died with those ideas, but
Totally.
I mean, it's give and take, right? Like nobody's gonna just say, hey, I'm giving just because I just want to give, right? It's like there is some selfish aspect to it. And I think that's a healthy thing to have and to recognize too. But where it becomes like you're this all-knowing, martial artist that's selling magic to like
Fuck out of here with that. Yeah.
Hadouken somebody, you
The
know what I
sound
mean?
waves, like, oh, get
yeah.
the fuck out of here. Like,
Yeah.
no, let me ask you this, man. So, I mean, I'll
Mhm.
add to that. Jiu-jitsu itself at one point was nothing other than judo. And if a person didn't step out and say, hey, I'm going to travel, I'm going to go to different places, I'm going to run fades with people. Like I'm going to pull up in Brazil and I'm going to run fades and I'm going to make that happen. If he didn't even just have the idea to say, I'm going to take what I already know and then I'm going to do it a slightly different way. If he didn't do that, a guy like Helio Gracie can't say, okay, I'm going to take the stand-up aspect of judo and I'm going to minimize it. I'm too small to really just be tossing these dudes around like this. So I'm going to more so focus on just the ground fighting aspects of this martial art because that's what I'm more suited to physically. If he didn't do that, because I'm sure his family, he was like one of the small guys in the family, the really big time Gracie brothers in my age, get the fuck out of here. Like he ends up being the guy that revolutionizes the art. The sport I love, the art that you practice probably wouldn't even exist if this guy didn't say, hey, fuck it, I'm going to do this. So, hey, fuck it, I'm going to do this is really important to life.
Yeah, it makes me think about so many things, like doing this podcasting shit. It's like such a great art form, It makes you really think deeply about like, okay, our experience, right? We'll just say like hip hop, the turntable. Had it not been for the turntable, I mean, a lot of kids wouldn't have a means of self-expression.
Absolutely.
Like what blossomed from just a spinning disc that, and I think about things like that and the vehicles that people have for expression. I don't know. It's just kind of a beautiful thing. Like it takes, the whole human experience, right? Is just people taking ideas and regurgitating it in their own personal way, right? And yeah, to that, yeah, okay. So what I'm thinking of, okay, if you take countries like China and Russia, ways that we in the U.S. in our education system have where the history has been muddled a little bit. Even if it's just by decades of storytelling, the stories are going to change.
Right.
That's just a natural thing. Do you see history in that way as well? That, there are just some parts that aren't just going to be, talked about more than other things, I guess.
Totally. And I think it really it depends on the place and the time, because those two countries that you named, Russia and China. Let's take
Mm-hmm.
like the thing that we love talking about in this country. We love talking about World War II. You can say
Right.
really World War II didn't start in Europe. You can say it started in China. You can say that it started with the invasion of Manchuria by the Japanese imperial forces. Because really, that war was the jump off point for Japan to really expand and do the things that it did in following. The part that is left out in regards to Russia and the Soviet Union is that they lost 20 million people fighting that war. And our efforts, especially coming from Normandy, they just wouldn't have been possible. The part that we heroicized wouldn't have been possible if the Germans weren't stuck fighting the Russians and losing people by the millions, losing Stalingrad, these different places. These things happening and that war being a stalemate, and Germany losing that war and being on the retreat made it possible for us to catch them in the middle. Of course, we're not going to give anybody else props, like as a country. And I think we kind of have to remember that even the country, like the government and the system and history, it's all made up by people. And everybody's going to have their spin that makes most people aren't willing to come out and say, oh yeah, I got my ass whipped. Like, oh yeah, I stepped to that dude and I got stolen. I got knocked out. I'll say it. Like, if it's true, I'll be like, yeah, I got knocked the fuck out. Like, so what? Like, that's just having enough confidence in yourself to say, hey, it is what it is. You're going to think whatever you want to think about. I feel like when it comes to countries, a certain level of coercion is almost necessary for the running of society, unfortunately. And you talked about the thread being exposed in terms of the pandemic and how precarious everything is. Everything's always precarious. There's always something that can come along and just knock everything sideways. Society has to find a way to get people to follow the rules, invest themselves in the rules, invest themselves in the system. People need to join the military. People need to do this. People need to do that. So right now, it's going to be China. It's going to be Russia. It might be Iran. It might be whoever. They're going to be the boogeymen. They're not going to get a fair shake as far as historical treatment, as far as historical context for maybe why they're acting the way they do. When it comes to our ideals are always going to be held up in a higher regard. That's just part of living in a nation state. And really, it's inescapable. I don't think an individual person, especially if you're living in America, you have access to everything. And with the internet, you have access to every perspective you want. If you want the Russian perspective, you can go get it. I think that's, if you truly want to understand something, the first thing you got to understand is you still might get it wrong. Like, everything I've said today could be total bullshit and be proven to be total bullshit tomorrow. And I could be looking like I was the dumbest dude on earth, but that's just how it goes with this stuff. But you're not going to get it right. You might not get it right, period. But what you can do is just fill in the blanks from the stuff that everybody else leaves out. If they don't talk about, like, when we talk about the Vietnam War, we don't talk about the fact that the Vietnamese had been fighting for so long. Like, they were very effective. They had this infrastructure there because they had to fight the French. And then they were fighting the Japanese before that. So they had been a couple decades deep in warfare before we really turned it up. We don't acknowledge that. We don't acknowledge the fact that they were able to leverage their connections with the Soviet Union, China, that they were able to do all these things through diplomacy. And we couldn't get our way there. No matter no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't figure out that they had their own society, they had their own system. We tried to impose ours, and we can say whatever we want about that situation. We lost that one. Right. And whatever our perspective is, if it doesn't acknowledge their perspective as well, it's not a complete rendering of what happened.
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of crazy too, is that once you travel outside these borders, these American borders, the narrative can quickly change in your own mind about where the United States places in the world. I mean, you can't change that fact, right? But at least in your own mind, I hold the United States in very high regard as far as like, let's just go with the Philippines. It was my thinking that everybody there is trying to get to the United States to make a better life. And whether you are or not, I don't know. But that doesn't mean that people outside of the United States aren't happy living their lives, right? Same thing with Vietnam. It's like it's a beautiful country and people are getting along very well and it's clean and it's not dirty like San
Right.
Francisco.
Right.
You
It's
know, so
especially
like
that. Like, I don't know if you ever see anybody taking a shit on the street in Ho Chi Minh City. Like, I hope not. Like,
no, not at all. I mean, they're cooking food on the streets. Street food is clean. Here, you can't even do the same thing without like going through hula hoops just to serve food. Hot dog stand
right.
people that are just getting shoved off the streets. It's like, I mean, the level of cleanliness, even in Japan, opened up my eyes to just the care that people take in their own personal spaces. And it's just something different because I don't know. I guess what I was trying to get at when I was talking to you earlier, and when you mentioned Christianity and Islam and bringing people together, is I try to think about things that will bring people together, and I have ideas in my mind that we can go into it at another time. But I do have this feeling that if people really looked, I mean, which is funny too, is because I've been thinking about the Michael Jackson song.
Which one?
What is it called? Man in the Mirror.
Oh, the Man in the Mirror. Yeah, it's a cool video too.
Yeah,
I really like
the
video for that.
I mean, corny it is to some people that might think about that song, and just like the message of it is really powerful. It's like, everybody thinks about changing something else but themselves, and I think about the conflict in Ukraine and Russia, where I don't know the details about too many things. I know that if a guy like Vladimir Putin or whoever we want to just put on the chopping block, right, was a little bit more intrinsic about the way they looked at the world, maybe he might think a different way. People might look the other way rather than the way it's going right now, and it's horrific. But I mean, anybody that studied the history of the world knows that change only happens, well, violence is a big part of nature, human nature. And, I guess what's that saying? Those who don't study violence will always be subject to it.
Yeah. Might end up subject to it anyway. I mean, like,
yeah,
I don't know. That's something I've thought about a lot. And it's like, I don't know. It's just, I think in terms of things to bring people together, I think people that physically need to be together more. And I think it's easier for these kind of fissures in society and these cracks and these divisions. I think they're so easy to form when people spend so much time away from each other. And not even just in a sense of like, we're doing this thing remotely, more in the sense of like, these people are over here. These people are over here. This is my neighborhood. That's your neighborhood. I think people, there need to be people who are outgoing, that are willing to say, I'll be around anybody. And they might not have ever even been around a person like me before. I might be the first person like me that they've ever met, but I'm willing to say, hey, I'm going to establish a relationship either with this person, with this community, whoever, and just say it's important for me to know that I'm on your side too. We have nothing in common. We don't have this. We don't have that. I'm here. Let's sit down and eat a hamburger together, get a pizza or something. Like, I feel like folks, and I've been guilty of this in terms of overthinking, well, we could do this or we could do this. We could do this, man. There ain't nothing that a couple of beers or a joint or a meal and just physically being in the same place and talking and dropping the pretense and just accepting each other as people. I feel like that's how we grow the net of, if we're a community and we're not on a violent setting, we don't want problems with people, we want peace, we have to physically go out and show that. And doing stuff like this is part and parcel of that. I feel like I'm not going to say I'm helping to solve the world or anything like that, but if I can bring my stories to people who are largely in the English speaking world, like most of my audience is in America, but I have people in Ireland, I have people in England, I especially have people in Australia. Like, shout out to all the people in Melbourne. Like, I really got a lot of people from Melbourne, Australia that show a lot of love. Like, people in Sydney, people in Auckland, New Zealand. they might not ever even meet any people like the ones I'm talking about, but I can just show you this is their story. You guys might have gone through something similar. These people are no different from you in that regard. And there's more commonality really than there is division. And I look at like where my dad's from. I look at Catholics and Protestants, with the exception of one being Catholic, one being Protestant. There's way more in common than that. There's a lot of commonality there. There's a lot of just understanding. There's a lot of doing the same stuff. There's a lot of eating the same foods, watching the same teams, playing the same sports. All that stuff is common. We let the socioeconomics, we let some of the propaganda, and we let just the religious difference get in the way of all the commonality. And I think for people that are naturally inclined to be outgoing, curious people, you really just have to go be that. And we're going to be able to push that agenda more than people who just want things to stay the same.
How early of an age do you remember being just connected to these stories and history, just grasping this kind of knowledge?
My dad was telling me about stuff that was going on politically when I was 5 or 6 years old. So from that time, like I grew up in one of those types of families of just a really politically oriented, militant family. So that's been part of my consciousness as long as I can remember.
Mm-hmm. And so do you think that's where you got your storytelling, knack for storytelling from?
I think I used to be really full of shit when I was younger.
Yeah.
So I think
yeah.
That's part of where it comes from. But like,
right.
I think the part of that is Irish culture. We sit around and talk. That's what we do.
Right.
We sit around and talk. And
there you go.
I think part of that is the family. Like my dad was really musically inclined. He was a great banjo player. He could play anything that was like shaped like a guitar. He had that talent. My mom and dad come from different backgrounds. My mom comes from the suburbs. She's from San Carlos. So like,
oh shit. Yeah.
she came up like middle class. Like she wasn't like rich or anything, but she didn't come up the way I came up, or definitely the way my dad came up. My dad was living like 10, 12, members of the family in a 2-bedroom apartment. And hella kids, like just everybody everywhere. And my mom
sounds like a Filipino house.
Not that different, man. Like that's the main thing I learned as an Irish dude. Like I could talk to some Filipinos, I can talk to some Nigerians, I could talk to some Jamaicans, I can talk to some Mexicans, some Salvadorians. It all sounds like kind of the same thing. Like we're working with a lot of the same dynamics, but it's just funny when other people learn that and they're like, damn, like you Irish dudes, like man, you sound just like us.
Yeah, I'm only asking, and I point that out because I don't know, I love to write, and I always loved like the storytelling rappers, right?
Me too.
Putting a story together, but I wouldn't say that it's a strong trait in our family. In my family, like storytelling there are stories that are told, but it's not like in a really elaborate, long form kind of story. And it's something that I always try to, just try to improve on myself. And thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And we're like 2 hours in. This has been hella fun.
Awesome, man. This was legit. Yeah. And I mean, it was what I thought it would be, to where we just, there's enough commonality to say, fuck it, let's just see where the conversation goes. So,
and it's cool too, because I had so many questions that I wanted to ask you, but I'm just like, fuck it, I'll save it for the next time.
Fuck it. How about this? Hit me with one more then. What's your top question that you want to ask me?
Wow. I wanted to talk about Shrimp Boy, how amazing what that was, but we could leave that for another time.
That ties into some of the same stuff we're talking about though.
Yeah.
Shrimp Boy, I mean, I'll say this, man, like the G homies, like the Asian G homies, those were some scary dudes back in the day and still are. Like, I think there's this reputation that Chinese, Vietnamese people have where people think they're
Mhm.
soft, and it's like, no,
Mm-mm.
like, especially a lot of the dudes coming over from Hong Kong, like some of those dudes like Shrimp Boy, he was gangbanging even before he got to America. And
Mhm.
the level of gangbanging that a guy like that is going to engage in a city like Kowloon, in the walled city, where it's controlled by organized crime, it's controlled by a triad.
Mhm.
He might have already killed somebody by the time he came to the States. And
Mhm.
I had a friend that got killed. Like my first friend that ever got killed, period, was killed behind gangbang. And he was from Wohopto, or not Wohop, I'm sorry, he was from Hop Sing Boys. And they were getting into it with Jackson Street at the time. And Jackson Street was like the boogeyman. They were the boogeyman in the streets. Like, obviously, I'm around the corner from the guys from 24th and Mission. I'm around the corner for the guys from 24th and Folsom. I'm around the corner from MS. I
Wow.
had to deal with the guys from the different Sureño neighborhoods just around the way and stuff. Those things could all get a certain way. There was a tagging crew in Bernal Heights called DOT, and they
Mhm.
used to rob people for their bikes. I knew the leader of that. He was another Irish guy. We'd known each other since we were kids. Like, he's older than I am. I'd known him since I was like 6. But unless he was
Mhm.
there, that I was getting jacked by those dudes. So we had all these street guys. We had the guys from Alamany. I got chased by
Mhm.
them before. Like we saw each other, knew what it was. Like, they started running, I ran the other way. You had to contend with like the street boogeyman, but it was like, don't play with Jackson Street. And
Yeah.
my friend Ronnie, rest in peace, he got killed in an arcade by
Mhm.
a dude from Jackson Street who shot him in front of an arcade full of people. And
Wow.
it's something that, like I said, especially with there was this recent, I think it's still going on, violence against Asian people. I
Mhm.
feel like a lot of people's perception is, oh, those fools won't do shit. Like, they're this,
Mhm.
they're that. And it's like, no, like, I don't know if I talked about it on either episode, but there was a girl I was working with that I went to high school with. She
Mhm.
was Chinese. She was cool. She was cool. We ended up working together at Pier 39 when I was like 17, 18 years old. And like, she
Mhm.
told me she had a man. I was like, man, I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm still going to try to do what I'm going to do. And then we're talking, and she was like, my boyfriend's crazy. And, you know, I've been in the streets most of my life. To me, that doesn't really mean anything. But then she said, yeah, we were outside in the Tenderloin yesterday. He saw an enemy and he started shooting just right on the street. Like, he didn't even
Damn.
like throw up the neighborhood first. He didn't do nothing. It was all action. And
Mhm.
by that point, I was pretty used to that for the dudes that were living that type of life that were Asian. Those dudes, they were kill time. And it
Mhm.
wasn't something to play with. Like, I
Mhm.
got into it with some of those dudes too in high school. Kind of got into it with people. Like, the only school I think I didn't get into it at was Independence. And that's because I only
Mhm.
had to go one day a week. And it's like, I'm just going to
Yeah.
get into it with like the teacher. And I knew
Yeah.
a lot of people that went there, but it's like some of the guys that were in some of those gangs, like, they were out committing extortion. They were doing the dragon
Mhm.
dances where they'd pull up to a business and be like, hey, what's up, man? We're going to do a dragon dance for good luck. And if you don't give them a donation, they're going to burn your shit. So
Mhm.
like, all
Mhm.
that stuff was going on when I was a kid. And it just seemed like for whatever we had to deal with, that shit over there was infinitely more serious.
Right. Right. And that reading about that story really opened my eyes. I mean, there were so many aspects to it. It was like real life Departed shit, the way he went
Yeah.
down. Um, but also it exposed like safe houses,
Mm-hmm.
you know, some even in the neighborhood that that we live in, or the neighborhoods that we've lived in. And it just opened my eyes, like, holy shit, like, these could be people just driving around the neighborhood, maybe even just hanging out on the corner.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't even look twice. They're just really minding their own
Right.
business, but they have the ties to it. Like, and I was just like, wow, if there was connections to like a senator
There was.
and all, yeah,
No, there
yeah,
was.
senator,
So,
no, there was, yeah. And I mean, if it was like that, then like, what are the remnants of that system? Just because that they went down, it doesn't mean like it's over.
no, not
You
at
know what
all,
I
man.
mean?
Not at all.
Right,
I mean, but
right, right.
damn near every year in San Francisco, somebody involved in government or something goes to jail for corruption or gets busted.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's a dude that's been in the news now, Muhammad Nuru
The
from,
DPW guy,
yeah, it's my
something
mom's
like
old
that, right?
boss. So it's like,
Yeah.
she knows that dude very well.
Hmm.
And he was probably doing all that bullshit when she was still working there. But the senator that I alluded to, that's Leland Yee, man. That guy spoke at my fucking graduation. And it was like,
right, I remember.
It was a bunk ass speech too. It was like, man, why did they even bring this dude here? And then that's for people in the rest of the country, they might only be familiar with Leland Yee because he was very vocally anti-gun. And then he gets busted for fucking arms trafficking. Like, that's San Francisco in a nutshell. And it's like, and you know what the funny thing is, to tie this whole thing together, he was he told Shrimp Boy's people, he told Shrimp Boy personally, I'm going to bring some missiles and some weapons in from the Philippines. Because I think people down in Mindanao, he said he was in contact with them, with some of the Islamic resistance groups. And it's like, damn, exactly. That's San Francisco for you in a nutshell. A guy that's a snitch can end up taking over a neighborhood again and become the die low for everybody. Not even just this guy's die low. He's the big time die low for everybody. He's the big brother for the whole city. And he's in contact with the senator who's anti-gun for political reasons, but is saying he's going to contact a terrorist group in the Philippines to send you weapons. That's San Francisco.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, pretty much. And it was crazy because we grew up around like the nightclubs that Shrimp Boy was like, you know what I mean? I mean, I've never, maybe I have seen him personally, but I mean, these were the same places we were walking around, same places we were hanging out. And to have a guy at that level, I was like, whoa, that, you know, San Francisco is not as, you know, laid back as a lot of people think.
Not at all, man.
Not around the world for sure.
I don't think I'll say this. I don't think there's going to be a Shrimp Boy, like a kind of flamboyant, openly, like, I don't know if you saw him on TV after he got out of prison. He was talking all this bullshit about, oh, you know, I got 7 girls in my bed and all this other shit. And it's just like, dude, you need to take your ass somewhere else, because I know you're still in the mix. Like, I know you're still doing stuff. A dude like you doesn't know how to do anything else. But it's like that kind of gangster, the guy that is a public face, everybody knows, like, he's the guy that's got to be walking down Grand Street and saying hi to everybody and all that kind of shit. Those guys are always the front for something bigger behind them. But I think right now, where unless you live in another country, if you're going to be involved in organized crime, you got to be in the cut. Like, you got to be in the background. And it's like those kind of public figures, I feel like that's almost like that's part of America's history as well, of having these big bandits, the Al Capones and the people of that nature, the Billy the Kids, and these big time public. And being a criminal, John Gotti, he's a guy that people still talk about him like he was a genius. John Gotti was openly doing business like it was the 50s, and he was being surveilled the whole time. He gave everybody up. And it's like the guy that turned on him, you know, Sammy the Bull, did that because John put a hit on him. And it's like he's doing all this stuff openly. I don't think you're going to see that anymore. I don't think a person can do all that like Shrimp Boy was doing. And I mean, the thing is that he can rely on people in his community to probably not call the police on him. But for everybody else, you got maybe 1 or 2 years of being that dude, of being, oh, I'm the big baller, I'm the big this, I'm the big that, before somebody either tells on you, like you get busted through your own stupidity, or you get killed. And it's just like a guy like Shrimp Boy ain't gonna pop up anytime soon. I'd be surprised.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much technology now, and I feel like that's the next generation of criminal. Yeah. Right? Like these kids that know how to navigate the black market. Emojis. I'm reading that emojis are how drug dealers are communicating where they're going to be at and what type of shit they're selling. And I mean, it's just such a different time from how we grew up. Thinking about how we grew up now, and you mentioned, you know, b-boying and things like that, even rapping. Yeah. Like style. What's a style now? Style is like, it's not even regional anymore. No, everybody sounds like they're from everywhere.
Right.
You
or
know?
Nowhere. Like, it's just like,
nowhere.
you just sound like the next dude that did it first. And it's like,
yeah,
I remember that being a big part of hip hop. It was like, you couldn't be a biter. And it's like, if you were biting, like, even I was tagging, I had a cool little style to it. I had a cool little hand flow. Somebody else already had the name though. So I was like, okay, cool. I gotta come up with something else. Like, now it's like, you have to do what people are doing. You have to go along with it. And it's like that kind of conformity really goes in the face of what it was all about. But then if you trip, hip hop was really just about partying. partying, motherfuckers dancing, people drinking, meeting some girls. Like it ends up being both at the same time, like most things, I feel like, where it can represent so many different things. But I would like to see the individuality come back more than anything else.
Yeah. And I remember, I haven't published this episode yet, but a friend of mine who was really into b-boying was like talking about how everybody learned, right? And it was the VCR, the tapes, like you rewind the tape, go back to the linoleum dance floor, and then practice the move. But now it's just like everybody's got a phone, everybody's got so much access to information that's unprecedented.
Right.
Do you ever think that there's just too much information to digest, or do you feel like this is the shit? Like,
I'm definitely this is the shit.
Yeah,
I'm a fucking nerd though, so it's like this is paradise for me to be able to I can just in 2 seconds find anything. I think the sad thing is that exists, and people still go about stuff the way they were in the 90s and times before, where it's like the most important thing to somebody is what some other motherfucker told them, versus just coming up with it on their own or doing their own research. Yeah. I think I can even have an appreciation for the guys that do their own research. No, I'm not gonna. I'll keep it G. If you're on some QAnon shit and that's all you're researching, I'm not trying to hear about it. Like I'm not trying to have that conversation with you. But I can at least appreciate that you're going out and trying to learn about stuff. But I think as we talked about it earlier, it's so hard now with there being so many just narratives not even grounded in reality that people accept, and they're willing to die for those at this point. And it's like, I think those narratives connect with something that people are missing. And people, I think, especially like if you want to use the QAnon stuff, people don't like the fact that they got to get up, go to work, do the same shit you did the day before, not really get appreciated for it. Nobody's like shining a spotlight on you and your efforts, but this is a puzzle you can solve, and you're saving the children. So you're a part of something, you're a part of a movement, and you're doing something. And it's that need to do something, or it's that need to feel, the need to not just have the banalities of existence just always present. I don't know. That's always going to be remedied in some way, and in somehow,
How I found you was, San Francisco graffiti. And I've always been real. I mean, it's always, I can remember being a kid in a booster seat in the backseat of my mom's car, just looking at the graffiti underneath the BART train on Alamany.
Yeah. I know what you're
just
talking
how
about.
many pieces they were there. The Quake City Portal, which is the name of the podcast. I found Quake City behind a mechanic spot on Excelsior. It was thrown up there, and I know, like I mentioned, my friends' older brothers, they would dress up as homeless dudes and go throw up at night, so that's the only connection I have. And you mentioned, a lot of things in that podcast that you put up that connected me to that world that I never knew about. So, I mean, I just want to know if you could speak about, I don't know, the lifestyle, I guess, the adventures,
Absolutely,
some of the adventures that, yeah.
I love to, man. I mean, those are, even though we were doing something destructive, like those are some of the best years of my life. Like, I think what we were just talking about in terms of feeling connected to something, feeling you're connected to a group or a movement, all because there were different times in the city where just all of a sudden everybody was tagging. Like it just seemed like it would be there. And then all of a sudden it would be there to the 20th power. And when I got caught up in graffiti, I got caught up in one of those times. And your lifestyle is everything is graffiti based. Like all your lingo is graffiti based. You're really only just kicking it with taggers. If you got friends that don't tag, you don't shut up about tagging to them. Like, oh, I was doing a motherfucker. I don't care. Like, let's play some video games. Like it was like that. Every time you go outside, you're searching every little corner to see who's running. And I talked about in the episode, there was the world of the guys that did pieces. And then there was the world for the guys like me who are just, you know, bus hoppers and we're doing hand styles. We're toys. Like I was a straight toy. I had no talent. Like I'm not artistic in that regard. So my shit was trash. And for me, the focus was on getting up and being seen. So any opportunity I took, I was like a coiled snake, always ready to hit up. Every time I leave the house, every time I hop on a bus, like I have a marker, I got a scriber, I got one of those SGs or a streaker, stuff that doesn't have any kind of smell associated with it. Because when you get on a bus and you hit up with a pilot or some shit, everybody's going to know it's you. So I always tried to just be a little bit more covert about it. But the focus was on getting up. The focus was on meeting other taggers. Oh, I met so-and-so from this place, this place, this place. At that time, there was actually an AOL chat room. And I got to know a lot of people through there because I was a little young kid that was just super about graffiti. Like at that time, I was like 13 years old. And I was active. Like I was active every single day. I'm tagging. And anytime I got on the bus, the motive was tagging. Like even the only time I'm not tagging is when I'm with people I shouldn't be tagging around. But my whole life was consumed by it. And it felt like it was something all of us were a part of. And we could all get up. Like we can meet up 10 of us. We can go get on the bus together, crush the whole bus, get kicked off the bus together, get into shit with bus drivers. Like I got a little short video from that time that I'm going to put out where we had an antagonistic relationship with like a hard white dude, 70s white dude bus driver. So like one of those old white dudes from, you know, probably from like out by the beach, like 46th, those dudes are always looking to fight and shit. When they get older, they become fucking bus drivers and UPS drivers and things like that. We got into it with one of those dudes and it was personal beef with the fucking 40-year-old man. And we're like 14-year-old kids. So you meet a lot of different people. You get to learn the dynamics of crews. You get to even learn the dynamics, how groups expand, how they contract, how they die, how groups assimilate, how you can take some members of one group and then kick out other members. And I saw that with HTS and FMT, where there were some guys, I'm not going to say their names because this shit's fucked up, but they were some dudes that were part of FMT. FMT lost the battle to HTS, got absorbed. So FMT does not exist anymore. These are all like teenagers, but it was everywhere in the mission. And HTS used to be like 50 or 100 deep sometimes on Cortland and Mission. So it was, it got serious, but they absorbed some of the guys from FMT. And then there was like 3 dudes. They got robbed by their own people and then kicked out the crew. And it's just like only one of them was still tagging after that. The other guys just said, fuck it. And it's like everybody knew that about him. And those little stories, like you hear about like the people from TK and then FCK and they're funking and now they're fighting. And you just pick up these little pieces of gossip and you talk to enough people that you kind of form a complete story, kind of like what we were talking about earlier. And it's like, all these things are all human. They're all humanity based. And it's like all rules of humanity apply in all aspects of just human life. All those rules apply. So even when we're kids and we're forming these combinations, we're coming together as crews, we're still subject to those same rules that we don't even know exist. We're doing all these things and we're following these processes that some of us are never even going to learn about. But when I started learning about stuff, I'm like, oh my God, this is the same shit we were doing when we were tagging. So just, I don't know. For me, it was something that I jumped just my whole body into it. And it was my lifestyle. It was how I talked. It was everything to me. And it stayed that way for some time. Yeah.
Was there, because whenever I see, even now, I'll take a notice to a lot of the shit that gets pieced up around the neighborhood. And even in the city, when I'm driving on the freeway, I'm just like, each piece is like a story. You know, it's on the fucking roof of a
warehouse or some shit, or a water tower.
Warehouse,
like, yeah.
And it's up there, you know, and I'm just like, I'm thinking, you know, this movie Free Solo came out about this kid, Alex Honnold, that's like climbing walls, right? But like before I even seen that, I'm like thinking of these kids that are like climbing up with, I don't know, I'm sure shitload of art spray cans, whatever,
in your backpack and shit.
Yeah. And I'm just like, that's a story right there that doesn't even get told enough. about. And maybe because it's like it's destruction of public property, but whatever, like there's billboards up everywhere that's like advertising,
Right.
throwing shit in your face. So I don't know. I mean, was there anything like that going on in your circles? That kind of shit?
I mean, in terms of people doing pieces, absolutely.
Yeah. I
Absolutely.
mean, like getting up in places like crazy like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Okay.
definitely. And it's like going to yards. My favorite was the Coors Yard off Army Street.
Uh-huh.
I remember the first time we went there was a dude smoking crack, and he let us
Yeah.
know that he was smoking crack and he wasn't tripping off us painting. So I was like, okay,
Mhm.
cool. That's what's up. So we were in those places. I think because Ty got killed around that time, like Ty got killed in
Mhm.
98, I think. And
Mhm.
Ty, for people who don't know, Ty was a guy named Jonathan. I believe his name was Jonathan Lim or Jonathan Lamb. 18-year-old kid, immigrant to the U.S. Was Chinese. I believe he was born in the Philippines, though. And he got killed climbing up the side of somebody's building. And anytime I ever heard about something like that, for me, it stuck. And especially almost losing. By the time I started tagging, I'd almost died once. And by the time I was done tagging, I'd almost died twice. And they weren't related to anything I was doing tagging wise, street wise, or nothing like that. But it was just, I always had that understanding of like, hey, it could have gone the other way. You might not even be here. So the things that were going to cause me to get killed, I really tried to avoid them. And especially at that time, there was enough of them. Like just a word or a look at the wrong person, you can die. Like here, I get the finger like every couple months. Someone's like, "Fuck you," and I'm like, "Oh man, if you did that back home, you can get shot." Like,
right.
And here, everybody's got guns, but people they pop the aggressive stuff. Yeah, everybody's strapped here, and it's safe. And it's like it's safe. Everybody's scared. Everybody's strapped, but it's safe. And I don't know. I know I couldn't act that way back home. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And those dangers were all there all throughout the time that we were tagging too. You had to worry about heroes. You had to worry about somebody grabbing you. Grown men would fight you on the bus. People would do weird stuff. Like, you had to trip off the cops. Like, we're not supposed to be outside. So I had a homeboy I tagged with. He was really big. Like, he looked like a grown man when we were 13. So if we were outside, it just looked like I was with my dad. So we didn't get sweated. And, you had to have little bits of tradecraft, if you want to call them that, just you got to make sure your mom, like it's just my mom at this time. So she was hands-on in terms of the shit I should be doing and not doing. So you got to hide that. Like you got to go about just all these different things that really prepare you for worse stuff if you're not inclined to direct yourself away from it. But like it's interesting because in LA, taggers kill each other. Like they have tag bangers that are almost like gangbangers. And for me, I got into tagging because it was not gangbanging. I want to be a part of that. And it's crazy to think that as an alternative, you could still end up doing the same thing.
I wanted to ask you too, what's the biggest takeaway from your experience? You said it's a big part of your life, tagging and that whole culture, right? And yeah,
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is how to fully immerse yourself, and fully immerse yourself in maybe something that's not your native anything. And it's something a lot of people don't do. A lot of people don't. They feel like when they get around people that are different, they have to maintain everything about themselves, and they notice all the differences. When you fully jump into something and immerse yourself and become part of it, it makes it so much easier to do that the next time you got to do so. So when I go see, my girlfriend's family in Colombia, I'm not going to trip off the fact that I'm American. They're all Colombian. They're all speaking Spanish. It's all this, it's all that. I've already made that immersion a million times. It doesn't affect me to say I can be around whoever. I can partake in any activity. We can talk about whatever. We can do whatever. And I'm going to be cool. I'll be comfortable just in that. And immersing myself into hip hop and just understanding how important it is to immerse yourself into something you love. That's been my greatest takeaway, because I loved hip hop. I still do. I loved graffiti. I love breaking. I was trash at it. But I loved it. And it's just like, you have to recognize and appreciate the things you love. And I've taken that away just the most.
Yeah. Right on. Can I ask you one last question?
Yeah, sure, man.
Before we go? So you're not in San Francisco anymore. And you consciously have said on your podcast that you're never coming back
to live now.
Right?
Nah.
Do you still feel that way?
You know what? I'll say this, man. If an apartment can get to like 1,000 or 1,500,
gotcha.
Yeah, I'll probably be back. Like it's with the way it is now. No, I don't see it happening. Right, it's like, I don't even see myself visiting anytime soon.
Yeah. Right. But, you know, you talk about it so fondly. I mean, and I really appreciate that you weave it in with all these stories that you share with everybody on your channel and on your podcast. But yeah, at this point in your life, you know, it's a big part of your life, but you've also said goodbye to it. And it's something that I don't see myself doing anytime in the near future. But I just wanted to ask what San Francisco is to you.
You know, and it's still home. It's still where I'm from. It and everything in there made me who I am. So it's central to my identity. I'm a San Franciscan, and I always will be. Everybody I meet is going to encounter the type of dude you were talking about. Just that's me. And I can't be me without San Francisco. I don't like what the city's become. I feel like if you don't have a bunch of money, it's not a place to be. And if that changes, I can see myself back there. It just, I wanted to leave when, after I left, I still felt like mentally I was still back there though. And it didn't take until I actually went back and I realized all my life is here. Like my life is in North Carolina. My life is east of the Mississippi. What I have back in San Francisco are connections. I have memories. I got friends. I have a lot of things I love, but it's just not the place for me to be anymore. But the place still means a lot to me. And as far as what it means to my mindset and how I present myself, how I talk, how I walk, the shoes I wear, how I wear my hat, like everything about it is I'm a San Francisco guy. And I didn't even get to appreciate that until I left. Like I didn't even realize the full extent of who I was until I was out of that environment. And it means even more to me now to know that I like who I am. So I couldn't be me without San Francisco.
Right on, man. Yeah, I want to be respectful of your time.
It's all good, man. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, this has been great. So much that we talked about in this podcast or for this episode or whatever, even in just conversation in general. Man. It's been a pleasure, man.
Likewise.
It's been a pleasure to connect with you and get a side of San Francisco that, like I said, we grew up so close to each other, but I mean, these are stories that I've never even heard. So
I tripped off something recently. Actually, somebody I know who's actually both of us. He is half Filipino and half Irish. So that dude, he went to Catholic school. Like he went to Reardon, he went to a couple other places.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. Just the experience of going to Catholic school, growing up in the city. He's from like Channery. So he's from just right around the corner from me. Was so different. Like even the composition of who he was around. And he was around Filipinos, he was around white folks and Latinos, and that was it. Like if there was a couple of maybe Polynesians that were on the football team or something like that, he might have been around them. But it was just so the opposite of how I grew up, to where we had Ethiopians, we had people from Yemen, we had people from Pakistan, we had Russians, we had me, Irish dudes. Like we had just every shade of the rainbow. And just the fact that his family could afford to send him to Catholic school, it left him out of all that. And he ended up having a completely different experience despite growing up like 10 minutes away. And even growing up, he's older than me. So he caught the tail end of the 80s as like a conscious adult. I only saw that shit as a kid. And that stuff was fucked up. Catching the full expansion of the crack epidemic. Like that would have been right outside his door. But just because of the stability he had in his house. He was able to just bypass most of that. And it's just, that's all it takes.
That really is all it took. I mean, my parents weren't rich at all. They actually busted their ass just so we could be in Catholic school.
Yeah.
And you're right. You know, it's fairly homogenous.
I didn't know that. I had no
yeah,
idea.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you telling me about that experience of somebody, maybe I might know him, maybe I might not. I mean, that's bonkers to me. That you had that experience and your friend had the same experience that I pretty much had.
Right.
Yeah, which is, you know, I mean, I always say that, like, you know, the Filipino experience is kind of like Luke Skywalker. He's kind of like late to the game and had nobody really to like, but you know, I mean, this is why I'm having these conversations, and I really appreciate your perspective. I'm fucking inspired, man.
I appreciate that, man.
It really matters to get perspective, I think. And that's what I'm getting from this conversation, is that even though we started in San Francisco, we branched off
everywhere, man.
And yeah, everywhere. You're like one of the only channels that I appreciate that talks about, like, you know, the whole wrestling fighting system, sambo, judo in Russia, and the whole what did you call it? The I'm blanking on the name. But basically the whole Caucasus, you call it.
Oh yeah, Caucasus.
Yeah, that was awesome. So I'm gonna post all that in the show notes and link everybody to you. And I'm really excited to see where your channel goes. And thank you so much, Connor.
Thank you for having me on, man.
Thanks everybody for listening. Please do us a good favor and give us a good rating on whatever platform you're listening to us on, if it allows for that. Follow us on social media. If you like this show and other past shows, it helps to share and spread the word. As much as I don't like self-promotion, I feel a tremendous obligation to the people who sit and spend time with us to share their deepest thoughts, ideas, emotions, and experiences. On Instagram, we are at the Quake City Portal, at Quake City Portal on Twitter, thequakecityportal.com, the Quake City Portal on YouTube channel for behind the scenes footage, as well as a video stream of the content we have on here, as well as future cooking shows, book reviews, and things I've been procrastinating on and getting out there. So once again, please leave a comment, suggest a guest for the show, or just point out something that you disagree with or agree with. Just let us know. Sorry about that. No timer. Anyway, thanks for listening. May you all be happy. May you all be healthy. May you all be peaceful. May you all be loved. See you down the road.